Hey there, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I've put together a new collection of interesting stories, so whether you're here to relax, fall asleep, or just listen in the background, this should be a good one. Feel free to let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always interesting to see where everyone is tuning in from. Now, let's start with the first story. It is titled,
My grandson called me late at night. Grandpa, I'm at the police station. My stepfather beat me. But he's telling them I attacked him. My mom doesn't believe me. When I got to the station, the officer went pale and stammered, I'm sorry. I didn't know. My name is Ed Anderson. I'm 63 years old and I was a police inspector for 35 years in a major city. Today I'm telling you how my life changed when I got a call in the middle of the night from my grandson Ethan, just 16 years old. He was crying, telling me he was locked up at the precinct because his stepfather Carter had accused him of assault. What I uncovered that night started a war against corruption that even I, with all my experience, never could have imagined. The phone rings at 3:14 a.m. At that hour, the sound seems louder, more urgent. In my years as an inspector, I learned that calls in the middle of the night never bring good news. I grab my cell and answer, half asleep. Hello, Grandpa. Ethan's shaky voice wakes me up instantly. I'm at the 7th precinct. They arrested me. Carter says I attacked him, but it's not true. He hit me first. Are you okay? Are you hurt? I get up immediately looking for my pants in the dark. My face hurts. I'm scared, Grandpa. The inspector here is friends with Carter, and he doesn't believe me. Please come. Don't move from there. Don't say another word until I get there. As I get dressed, I try to clear my head. Carter Vance, Ethan's stepfather. I always thought he was trouble. My daughter Mary died 5 years ago in a car accident. And just a year later, Grace, Ethan's mother, married Carter. I never understood what she saw in him. A businessman with contacts at City Hall always bragging about his influence. I grabbed my old inspector's badge, my wallet, and the car keys. Maybe I don't have official authority anymore, but I know the system and a lot of people still in it. The badge, even expired, still carries some weight. I drive through the empty city streets, anxiety eating me alive. Ethan was always a good kid. Studious, quiet, never looked for trouble. If he's in a precinct holding cell, something is very wrong. I get to the 7th precinct, a building I know well. I worked there my first 10 years on the force. As I walk in, the familiar smell of stale coffee and disinfectant hits me like an old friend. At the desk, a young officer is typing something. Good evening. I'm Ed Anderson, former inspector. My grandson, Ethan Alvarado, is being held, and I want to see him. The officer looks at me with indifference. One moment, she types something else and picks up the internal phone. Inspector Camacho, there's a man here who says he's the grandfather of the kid detained for assault. I wait impatiently, tapping my fingers on the counter. The inner door opens and Victor Camacho appears. I recognize him immediately. A heavy-set man about 50 with a graying mustache and small suspicious eyes. We worked together years ago, but we never got along. I always thought he was too flexible with certain rules. Well, Ed Anderson, his voice is deep, almost mocking. Long time no see, partner. I'm not here to socialize, Victor. I want to see my grandson and know exactly what he's accused of. Of course. Come into my office. He gestures inside. I follow him down the hall. At the end, I see the temporary holding cells. In one of them, I spot Ethan sitting on a bench, head down. I try to walk over, but Camacho stops me. Let's you and I talk first, Ed. Things are complicated. In his office, Camacho sits behind his desk, and I take the chair opposite him. There's a framed photo on his desk. Camacho with other men on what looks like a hunting trip. I recognize Carter Vance among them, smiling, holding a rifle. That confirms my suspicions. They're friends. Your grandson assaulted his stepfather tonight. Busted his lip, almost broke his nose. Carter is at the hospital getting checked out. Camacho speaks with practiced confidence. We have a video from the house security camera that shows the whole thing. The kid lost his temper. I want to see that video. Sure. He turns his monitor toward me and plays a file. On the screen, I see what looks like a living room. Carter walks into the frame, seemingly talking. Ethan appears, visibly upset. Suddenly, the image shows my grandson pushing Carter, who falls backward. The recording ends right there. That's it. Where's the rest of the video? This doesn't show anything conclusive. It's what we have, Ed. Carter is pressing charges for assault. The kid has a history of violent behavior at school. That's a lie. Ethan has never had disciplinary problems. I have reports that say otherwise. I stand up feeling the anger start to boil. I want to talk to my grandson right now. 5 minutes. Camacho concises. He leads me to the cell where Ethan is. When he sees me, my grandson stands up. He has a black eye, a cut on his eyebrow, and a swollen lip. Seeing him like this brings a mix of pain and fury. Grandpa. His voice breaks. It's okay, Ethan. I'm going to get you out of here. Camacho opens the cell and lets me in. I hug my grandson, feeling him tremble. What really happened? I ask in a low voice. Carter came home drunk like always. He started yelling that I stole money from his wallet. When I told him it wasn't true, he punched me. Tears run down his cheeks. I defended myself. I just pushed him to get him away from me, but he hit the table. Then he called the police saying I attacked him. Where was your mom? She's out of town for work in Dallas. She gets back tomorrow. Ethan lowers his voice even more. It's not the first time Carter has hit me, Grandpa, but he always threatens me. Says nobody will believe me if I talk. I glance at Camacho, who's waiting impatiently at the door. I'm going to get you out of here. I promise. I tell Ethan, squeezing his shoulder. You are not spending one more night in this cell. I walk out and confront Camacho. My grandson has marks all over his face. Why isn't Carter detained, too? Why isn't it in your report that he assaulted the boy? Mr. Vance says the kid got those injuries while resisting the officers during the arrest. That's absurd and you know it. I demand a doctor examine Ethan right now and document his injuries. It's pretty late for that, Ed. It's never too late to do things right, Victor. Either you call a doctor or I call the DA on duty to report irregularities in your procedure. Camacho stares at me weighing my threat. Finally, he sighs. Fine. I'll call the on-duty medical examiner, but it won't change anything, Ed. The kid is spending the night here, and tomorrow he'll see the judge. We'll see about that. As Camacho walks away to make the call, I pull out my cell and dial a number I haven't used in a long time. After 3 rings, a female voice answers. Lieutenant Roberts, who is this? It's Ed Anderson, former inspector, 7th Precinct. I need your help urgently. Lieutenant April Roberts is one of the few people on the force I always trusted. Young, smart, and most importantly, incorruptible. I explain the situation quickly. I'm on duty tonight, she says. I can swing by in 20 minutes to verify the procedure. I appreciate it, April. While I wait, I watch the movement in the precinct. A couple of officers look at me curiously. They probably know who I am. In my day, I had a reputation for being inflexible, for not taking deals or favors. It earned me respect from some and enemies from many. The main door opens and Carter Vance walks in. He's got a bandage on his nose and his bottom lip is swollen. Our eyes meet and he stops, surprised to see me there. Then he smirks and heads straight for Camacho's office. Minutes later, Lieutenant Roberts arrives. In her mid-30s, she has the steady gaze of someone who knows her job and tolerates no obstacles. She greets me with a firm handshake. Inspector Anderson, it's been a while. I'm not an inspector anymore, Lieutenant. You'll always be one to me, sir. You taught me half of what I know. Camacho comes out of his office, followed by Carter. Seeing April, he visibly tenses. Lieutenant Roberts, what brings you here at this hour? Routine procedure check. Inspector Camacho, I was informed of a domestic assault arrest and I want to verify everything is in order. Carter steps in, extending his hand. Carter Vance, sir, I'm the victim in this case. April ignores his hand. Lieutenant Roberts, I need to review the case file and see the detainee. I already called a doctor to examine the boy, Camacho says. Excellent. I'll be present for that exam. Now, the file. Camacho leads her to his office. Carter stays with me in the hallway, a smug smile on his face that turns my stomach. It's a shame we have to meet under these circumstances, Mr. Anderson, he says with false courtesy. Ethan always speaks so highly of you. Cut the hypocrisy, Vance. I know exactly what you did. His smile vanishes. Be careful what you imply. I have the video that proves who assaulted whom. A conveniently edited video. What happened before the part Camacho showed me? Nothing relevant. He steps closer, lowering his voice. Look, Mr. Anderson, I understand you want to defend your grandson, but the kid has problems. He needs discipline. A firm hand. The firm hand that gave him a black eye and split his eyebrow. I suppose he got that resisting arrest. Ask any of the officers who brought him in. Or maybe you did it and then you called your friend Camacho to cook up a story. Carter's face hardens. Be careful, old man. Your time is over. Things work differently now. You'd be surprised how well I know how things work now, Vance, and what I'm capable of doing for my grandson. We're interrupted by the arrival of the medical examiner, a young man who looks fresh out of school. Camacho and April come out of the office. Dr. Mendoza. Camacho greets him. Thanks for coming so quickly. The detainee is this way. April gestures for the doctor to follow her toward the cells. Carter tries to follow, but April stops him. Authorized personnel only. Mr. Vance. I'm the complaining party. I have a right to be present. Not during the medical exam, she says firmly. Wait here. Carter shoots me a furious look, as if I'm to blame for this delay in his plans. He sits in one of the waiting room chairs, drumming his fingers nervously. April signals for me to follow her. We enter the cell where the doctor is already examining Ethan. He takes photos of the injuries, measures them, and documents everything on an official form. Can you tell me how you got these injuries? The doctor asks. Ethan looks at me seeking approval. I nod slightly. My stepfather hit me. First a punch here. He points to his eye. And then he shoved me against the wall. I hit my head and cut my eyebrow on a shelf. When did this happen? Tonight. A little after 11. The doctor jots it all down and continues his exam. When he's finished, he turns to April. The injuries are consistent with his story. The parorbital hematoma, the black eye, has the coloring of a blow from about 4 to 5 hours ago. The cut on the eyebrow is characteristic of an impact wound against an object with an edge, not a direct punch. April nods. Thank you, doctor. I need your report as soon as possible. You'll have it in an hour, max. When the doctor leaves, April looks at me. This contradicts the initial report. Inspector, of course, it does. Camacho is covering for Carter. I also reviewed the video, she says in a low voice. Something's off. The metadata shows it was edited 2 hours ago. The original recording must be longer. Can you get it? I need a warrant to access the home surveillance system. And for that, I need proof of evidence tampering. Ethan speaks up. The neighbor, Mrs. Clean, she has cameras pointed at our driveway. She's always recording. Says people steal her flower pots. April looks at me with a spark of hope. Do you know the exact address? 247 Jacaranda Drive. In the Valley neighborhood, Ethan replies. I'm heading there right now, April says. If that footage shows something different, we can turn this whole thing around. I'll stay with him, I say, pointing to Ethan. I won't leave him alone, Grandpa. She promises, using the personal term. This stinks of corruption, and you know that's what infuriates me the most. When April leaves, I sit next to Ethan on the cell bench. He's exhausted, scared, but I see a spark of strength in his eyes that I've always admired. Does Mom know about this? He asks. Not yet. I was hoping to solve this before worrying her. She's going to take Carter's side. She always does. Your mother loves you, Ethan. But sometimes love makes us blind. Carter manipulates us. He makes her believe I'm the problem. That I disrespect him and she believes him because he stops. Because why? Because he has money. Because ever since Dad died, Mom is scared of being alone. It hurts to hear, but I know he's right. Grace, my daughter-in-law, never fully recovered from the death of my daughter, Mary. They were very close. Carter appeared at the perfect moment, offering financial and emotional stability. Or so it seemed. We're going to fix this. I promise, Ethan. And after you and I are going to have a long talk about everything that's been happening in that house. Time crawls by in the precinct. Camacho appears occasionally giving us anxious looks. Carter has stayed in the waiting room talking quietly on his phone. Almost 2 hours later, the main door opens. April walks in accompanied by a stern-looking older woman. District Attorney Melinda Moss. I recognize her immediately. Her reputation for being incorruptible precedes her. Behind them is a small elderly woman holding a cell phone. Mrs. Klein, I assume. Camacho's expression turns to pure panic when he sees the DA. Carter stands up, confused by this unexpected turn. Inspector Camacho, Melinda Moss says in a firm voice. Lieutenant Roberts has informed me of possible irregularities in this case. Show me the file and the video immediately. While Camacho, visibly nervous, leads the DA to his office. April approaches our cell. We found something, she tells me quietly. Mrs. Clean had recordings from 3 days ago showing Carter shoving Ethan against the door. And better yet, she has audio of him threatening him. Hope swells in my chest. For the first time since I got here, I feel like things might turn out okay. The system is rotten. I know that better than anyone. But there are still people like April and Melinda fighting for justice. Thank you, I say to April with all my heart. She smiles slightly. Don't thank me yet, Inspector. The night is young, and this battle is just beginning. DeMoss spends over an hour locked in Camacho's office. Through the blinds, I see tense gestures, documents being pointed at, severe looks. Carter stays in the waiting room, constantly checking his phone. I watch him try to keep his composure, but his right leg is bouncing nervously, betraying his anxiety. Mrs. Klein, Ethan's neighbor, approaches our cell with April. She's a small woman in her 70s, but with the sharp eyes of someone who's seen a lot. So, you're the grandpa, she says. No nonsense. The boy always speaks well of you. Thank you for coming, ma'am. Mrs. Klein, she corrects me. And don't thank me. That man, she gestures discreetly toward Carter, is a devil in disguise. I've seen him. Know how he changes when he thinks no one is watching. Ethan looks at her with obvious gratitude. Mrs. Klein winks at him. I brought you a donut, kid, but these cops wouldn't let me give it to you. Said it might have a file in it. She lets out a short laugh. As if I know how to do that. The office door finally opens. DeMoss comes out first, her face grim. Camacho follows, visibly uncomfortable. The DA approaches our cell. Mr. Anderson. I'm District Attorney Melinda Moss. Her voice is firm but not hostile. We've reviewed the case and I found significant irregularities in the procedure. Carter stands up, walking over quickly. DeMoss, a pleasure to meet you. Carter Vance, I trust you'll see justice done in this unfortunate incident. The DA barely looks at him. Mr. Vance, I suggest you contact a lawyer immediately. A lawyer? But I'm the victim here. That is yet to be determined, she replies dryly. Lieutenant Roberts, release Mr. Alvarado. His detention did not follow established protocols. April doesn't hide her satisfaction as she opens the cell. Ethan looks at me disbelieving. I can go. Yes, the DA confirms. But I need both you and your grandfather to remain available for further statements. Carter steps forward visibly upset. This is unacceptable. You're just letting my attacker go. What kind of justice is this, Mr. Vance? The DA's voice takes on a sharp edge. The recordings we've reviewed show a very different version of events. Tampering with evidence is a federal crime. If you wish to avoid more serious charges, I suggest you moderate your tone and cooperate fully with the investigation. Carter turns pale. He looks at Camacho, who avoids his gaze, understanding that the ship is sinking. Inspector Camacho, the DA continues. You are temporarily relieved of your duties until the internal investigation is complete. Surrender your badge and weapon to the officer on duty. Camacho's face twists in a mix of disbelief and contained rage. This is a mistake, DA. My procedures were standard. Your procedures included accepting tampered evidence and omitting crucial information from the initial report. The medical evaluation of Mr. Alvarado directly contradicts your statement of facts. The DA doesn't raise her voice, but every word lands like a hammer. Lieutenant Roberts is in charge of this precinct until further notice. We leave the precinct just as the sky begins to lighten. The cool morning air is refreshing after hours in that oppressive environment. Ethan walks beside me in silence, visibly exhausted but relieved. Where are we going, Grandpa? To my house. You can't go back to yours. Not right now. In the car, I notice Ethan slowly relaxing. The silence between us is comfortable, but I know we have a lot to talk about. This isn't over, is it? He finally asks. No, Ethan. It's just beginning. At my house, I make coffee while Ethan takes a quick shower. I lend him some old clothes from when my son Daniel, Ethan's father, lived with me. They're a bit big, but they'll do. Sitting in the kitchen with steaming mugs in front of us, we finally have that pending conversation. How long has this been going on, Ethan? My grandson stares into the dark liquid. Soon after he married Mom. At first, it was just yelling, small humiliations. He said I was lazy, that I didn't help around the house, that I spent too much. Did your mother know? It always happened when she wasn't there. And when I told her, Carter denied everything. He said I was exaggerating or just making things up to separate them. Ethan swallows hard. After a while, Mom stopped believing me. When did it turn from words to fists? About 6 months ago, he came home drunk, furious because he'd lost money on an investment. He said I was bad luck. That since I came into his life, everything was going wrong. Ethan's voice breaks slightly. He slapped me so hard I fell to the floor. Then he cried, apologized, gave me money so I wouldn't say anything. I feel the anger rising, but I forced myself to stay calm. Why didn't you call me then? I thought I could handle it and I was afraid that if I reported him, Mom would suffer. She seemed happy for the first time since Dad died. The phone interrupts our conversation. It's Grace, Ethan's mother. Dad? Carter just called me completely hysterical. He says Ethan attacked him and that you interfered to get him out of the precinct. What is going on? I explain the situation as calmly as possible, but Grace is skeptical. I know Carter, Dad. He's not the monster you're describing. You haven't seen your son. He has a black eye and his eyebrow is split open. Are you going to say he did that to himself, too? The silence on the other end of the line tells me everything. Part of her suspected, but she chose not to see. I'm on my way, she finally says. I want to talk to Ethan. After I hang up, I meet my grandson's questioning gaze. Mom's coming. Yes, but you don't need to worry. I won't let her take you back to that house. While we wait, Ethan finally falls asleep on the sofa. I watch him, remembering when he was just a boy, running through this same living room, chasing his father. Daniel, my son, died when Ethan was just 8. A highway accident, as absurd and sudden as these tragedies usually are. Grace was shattered, and Ethan grew up without that much-needed father figure. The doorbell rings just after noon. Grace is pale with dark circles under her eyes. And to my surprise, Carter is standing next to her. What is he doing here? I ask, not hiding my hostility. He's my husband, Dad, and we need to resolve this as a family. A family doesn't beat its members, Grace. Carter steps in, putting on his best concerned man face. Mr. Anderson, I understand your concern. There was a misunderstanding last night. Things got out of control, but I assure you I would never intentionally hurt Ethan. Save the act, Vance. The DA has evidence of your previous assaults. Carter pales for a moment, but recovers quickly. That meddling old woman twisted the facts. Any physical contact with Ethan has been purely disciplinary. Disciplinary? Errol's voice surprised us all. She's standing right inside my doorway in uniform, her expression serious. I didn't hear her arrive. Lieutenant Roberts, Carter says nervously. We weren't expecting you. Evidently, April steps forward. Mr. Vance, I have a warrant to seize the electronic devices from your home, including the video surveillance system. We need to recover the original recordings. This is an invasion of privacy, Carter protests. On what authority? On the authority of this warrant signed by Judge Miranda Espinosa. April shows him the document. Furthermore, the district attorney has requested that you report for a formal statement this afternoon. Grace looks at me confused and scared. Dad, what is happening? The noise wakes Ethan, who comes to the door, rubbing his eyes. When he sees his mother, he runs to hug her. When he sees Carter, he stops cold. What is he doing here? Ethan, we need to talk, Grace says, trying to sound conciliatory. Carter says there was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. Ethan steps back. He hit me, Mom. Like he's done so many times when you're not here. And then he threatens me so I won't say anything. Carter moves toward him, his gesture threatening. Stop lying, you ungrateful little brat. After everything I've done for you and your mother. Mr. Vance. April interrupts, stepping between them. I suggest you maintain your distance from Mr. Alvarado. Any attempt at intimidation will be added to the existing charges. Carter glares at her with barely contained hatred, but he backs down. This isn't over. I have powerful friends, connections. Your connections are also being investigated, April replies. Including your relationship with Inspector Camacho and certain City Hall officials. Carter looks at Grace. Are you going to allow this? Let them destroy our family over your son's lies. Grace seems torn between two loyalties. She looks at Ethan, then at Carter, then at me. I need to see those recordings, she says, her voice breaking. I need to know the truth. The truth is right in front of you, I tell her, pointing to Ethan's injuries. You just need to open your eyes to see it. Carter realizes he's losing ground. His face transforms, dropping the mask of the reasonable man. You ask for this, you meddling old man. If you think this will end well for you or for the brat, you are very mistaken. He turns and walks to his car, ignoring April's calls for him to report for his statement. Let him go, Lieutenant. I say he won't get far. Grace comes into the house protectively hugging Ethan. April stays with me at the door for a moment. He should have presented himself voluntarily, she says, or I'll have to arrest him. Will he? He's too arrogant to believe he's in real trouble. He's underestimating the seriousness of this. We found more videos on Mrs. Klein's phone. Episodes of abuse going back months. Does the DA have all this? Everything, and she is furious. Few things make Melinda Moss angrier than child abuse and police corruption. April looks at me seriously. Watch your grandson, Inspector. Men like him become most dangerous when they feel they're losing control. After April leaves, I go inside. Grace is sitting on the sofa, her head in her hands. Ethan's in the kitchen making you some tea. Why didn't I see it? Grace murmurs as I sit beside her. How could I have been so blind? Love blinds us sometimes, I say softly. And Carter is a good manipulator. You're not the first, and you won't be the last to fall for someone like that. My own son, she sobs. My boy. And I didn't protect him. You can still protect him now, I say. By leaving Carter. By testifying against him. Grace looks at me, determination growing in her eyes. I will. He will never lay a hand on him again. The next few hours pass in a strange calm. Ethan and Grace talk for a long time in the guest room. I try to keep busy, making food that nobody really has an appetite for. The phone rings several times. The DA, Lieutenant Roberts, even a couple of reporters who somehow got wind of the case. I tell them all the same thing. We'll talk after we rest. At nightfall, after Ethan has finally fallen asleep, Grace sits with me on the porch. I never imagined it would end like this, she says, looking at the stars. When I met Carter, he seemed so perfect, attentive, loving, stable. Manipulators always seem perfect at first. There were signs, she admits. Controlling comments, unexplainable jealousy, little lies, but I convinced myself they were unimportant. What will you do now? Divorce him, obviously. Testify against him. Try to repair my relationship with Ethan. She sighed deeply. It will be a long process. I'll be here to support you both, I assure her. My phone vibrates. A text from April. Carter never showed up for his statement. We've issued a warrant for his arrest. A chill runs down my spine. A man like Carter, cornered, is dangerous. What's wrong? Grace asks, noticing my expression. Nothing important, I lie, not wanting to worry her more. You should get some rest. That night, I sleep fitfully, waking at every noise. At 5 a.m, the phone rings. It's April again. We found Carter's car abandoned near the airport, but there's no record of him getting on a flight, she informs me. We think he might be using fake documents or someone is helping him hide. Have you checked his bank accounts? They've been frozen since last night. And we have surveillance on all his known properties. Watch Camacho, too. If anyone knows where Carter is hiding, it's him. Camacho is under constant surveillance. I hang up and stare out the window. The dawn light begins to illuminate the empty street. Everything seems quiet, but I can't shake the feeling that this calm is just the prelude to something worse. 2 days pass with no news of Carter. Ethan starts to relax, even smiling occasionally. Grace files for divorce and files a formal complaint for domestic violence. DeMoss informs me that the investigation has widened. Apparently, Carter is involved in shady deals with several municipal officials, including bribery and influence peddling. On the morning of the third day, Grace decides to go back to her house briefly to pick up some belongings. I insist on going with her, but she refuses. The police have had the house under surveillance all night, she says. Carter isn't there. Besides, I'll go with an officer. I'll be fine. Something inside me says it's a bad idea, but I don't want to seem overprotective. Grace already feels guilty enough. Call me when you get there, and before you leave, I tell her. I promise. Ethan and I stay home playing chess to distract ourselves. He's good at the game, calculating and patient. He reminds me of his father. The phone rings and I answer, expecting to hear Grace. Instead, it's Carter. Listen to me carefully, old man. His voice is agitated, frantic. Your daughter-in-law is with me. If you want to see her again, bring Ethan to the abandoned warehouse at 54 Industrial Avenue. 1 hour. Just you two. If I see a single cop, Grace will pay. Carter, don't be a fool. 1 hour, he shouts and hangs up. I look at Ethan, who has grasped the gravity of the situation from my expression. I can't tell him the truth, but I can't lie either. What's wrong, Grandpa? Is it Mom? Your mother is fine, I say, trying to sound convincing. But I need you to stay here while I go take care of something important. It's Carter, isn't it? Ethan's intuition surprises me. What has he done? At that moment, my phone rings again. It's April. Inspector, we have a situation. Grace never made it to her house. The officer who was supposed to escort her was found unconscious in his patrol car. Carter has her, I say directly. He just called me. He wants me to bring Ethan to a warehouse on Industrial Avenue in 1 hour or he'll hurt Grace. Don't go alone, Inspector. It's a trap. I know, but I can't risk my daughter-in-law's life. Get me the exact address. I'll send undercover units. I give her the details and hang up. Ethan stares at me. I'm going with you, he says firmly. No way. It's too dangerous. It's my mother, Grandpa. And this is my fault. It's not your fault, Ethan. None of this is your fault. If you don't take me, I'll go on my own. His determination is absolute. I look at him, weighing the situation. If I leave him here, he'll probably try to follow me, putting himself in more danger. If I take him, at least I can try to protect him. All right, I finally give in. But you will do exactly what I say. No questions. Understood? He nods gravely. Understood. As we prepare to leave, I can't help but think we're walking into the darkest part of this story. But I also know that sometimes you have to face the darkness before the light can finally come. The drive to the warehouse feels eternal. I drive in silence, Ethan beside me. His hands are shaking slightly, but his gaze reflects a determination that reminds me of his father. Before leaving, I tucked my old service pistol into the back of my waistband. I hoped I'd never have to use it again. But life has cruel ways of changing our plans. Do you have a plan? Ethan asks, breaking the silence. Lieutenant Roberts is sending undercover units. We won't be alone. What if they're late? What if Carter sees the cops and hurts Mom? I don't have a comforting answer, so I give him the truth. We'll do everything possible to make sure that doesn't happen. My phone vibrates with a text from April. Team's in position in 15 minutes. Wait before you go in, but we don't have 15 minutes. As we get to Industrial Avenue, I see the abandoned warehouse at the end of the street. It's a decrepit red brick building with broken windows and graffiti covering its walls. A perfect place for an ambush. I park a block away, scanning the surroundings. No other vehicles are visible, but I spot a black sedan with tinted windows near the side entrance. Must be Carter's car. Stay here, I tell Ethan. I'm going to check it out first, Grandpa, he said. We both had to go. I know, but I'm not putting you in danger. I'm already in danger, he replies with a maturity that surprises me. And so is Mom. You can't protect us both by staying here. You're right. It pains me to admit it. But before I can respond, my phone rings again. It's Carter. I see you've arrived. Get in here now or your daughter-in-law pays. We're coming. Carter, don't do anything stupid. You have 2 minutes. I look at Ethan, feeling the weight of responsibility crushing me. Stay behind me at all times. Understood? He nods gravely. We walk toward the warehouse, each step heavier than the last. The main door is ajar, creaking ominously as I push it open. The inside is dark, barely lit by light filtering through dirty windows and some skylights. Carter, I call out, trying to keep my voice steady. In the back, Ed. Both of you, come on. We move forward between boxes and abandoned machinery. The place smells like damp and rust. When we reach a larger open space, I see them. Carter is standing, holding Grace by the arm. Her face is stained with tears, but she seems unharmed. Mom! Ethan shouts, trying to run forward. I stop him, putting an arm out in front of him. Easy, I whisper. Then to Carter. We're here. Let my daughter-in-law go. Carter lets out a bitter laugh. You think it's that simple, old man? You ruined my life, my reputation, my business. Everything is in jeopardy because of you. You did this to yourself, I reply. No one forced you to hit a child. The brat needed discipline. Carter tightens his grip on Grace's arm, making her worse. And you meddling old fool, had no right to interfere in my family. Let me go, Carter. Grace says, her voice trembling. Please, this is only making things worse. Shut up, he yells, shaking her. You betrayed me, too. After everything I did for you and your ungrateful son. I scan the situation, weighing my options. Carter seems more and more unstable. His eyes have the feverish glint of a cornered animal. I don't see a weapon, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have one. What do you want, Carter? I ask, trying to buy time. I need April's units to arrive. I want my life back, he answers, his voice cracking slightly. I want all the charges dropped. I want the DA to stop the investigation into my business. And I want this brat, he points at Ethan, to take back all his lies. They're not lies, Ethan says with surprising calm. And you're right about one thing. You ruined your own life. Every time you hit me, every time you threatened me, every time you manipulated my mother, you dug your own grave. Carter lets go of Grace and lunges toward Ethan. It's the moment I was waiting for. I move quickly, putting myself between them. Don't you dare touch him. Or what, old man? What are you going to do? Carter shoves me, underestimating my strength. I don't budge. Get away from my family, I warn him, feeling the pistol press against my lower back. Carter smiles, a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Your family? How touching. The old cop protecting his own. He turns as if to walk away, but suddenly spins and throws a punch that I barely managed to dodge. The sudden movement makes me stumble back, giving Carter time to pull something from his waistband. A revolver. He points it directly at me. Now we're going to talk seriously, he says with a chilling calm. You and I know how this works, Ed. Men like us understand the language of power. Put the gun down, Carter. The police are on their way. Of course they are. I was expecting them. He smiles again, but by the time they get here, we'll have already settled our business. Grace takes advantage of the distraction to move to Ethan, hugging him protectively. Carter looks at them with contempt. Look at the happy family. How sweet, Carter. I try to reason with him. You can still get out of this. Put the gun down. Surrender. Cooperate with the DA. Maybe they'll make a deal. A deal? He laughs. No, Ed. Men like me don't make deals. We either win or he leaves the sentence hanging, but his look says it all. I hear a faint noise behind me. Someone has entered the warehouse. I keep my expression neutral, not wanting to alert Carter. Why don't we let Grace and Ethan leave? I propose. This is between you and me. No, Carter replies, waving the gun. They're part of this. They're my insurance. The noise becomes more obvious. Carter tenses, looking into the shadows behind me. Who's there? He yells. Show yourself or I shoot. I take advantage of his momentary distraction to move closer to Grace and Ethan, positioning myself in front of them. If Carter shoots, he'll have to go through me first. Police. April's voice echoes in the warehouse. Drop the weapon, Mr. Vance. Carter seems surprised, but not scared. Lieutenant Roberts, how predictable. Did you come alone or bring backup? You're surrounded, Vance. There's no way out. There are always ways out, Lieutenant. Carter adjusts his stance, steadying his grip on the revolver. You just need the right incentive. I glance into the shadows, trying to locate April. I see her partially hidden behind a column, her weapon aimed at Carter. Let them go, Carter, she says firmly. More units are arriving. In minutes, this place will be full of officers. Then we don't have much time, Carter replies. He suddenly points the gun at Ethan. Either you let me walk out of here or the kid pays for everything. It all happens in an instant. Without thinking, I lunge at Carter just as he pulls the trigger. The shot echoes through the warehouse, deafening. I feel a sharp pain in my shoulder, but I manage to tackle Carter, bringing him to the ground. The gun falls from his hand, skittering across the concrete floor. April emerges from the shadows, running toward us. Grace screams, holding Ethan, who seems unharmed. Carter and I struggle on the floor. Despite my age, the adrenaline gives me the strength to keep him pinned until April arrives and cuffs him. Are you okay, Inspector? April asks, noticing the blood on my shirt. It's just a scratch, I lie, feeling the pain intensify. Take care of him. More officers flood into the warehouse, securing the place. One of them comes to me with a first aid kit while Carter is pulled to his feet and led away screaming threats and insults. This isn't over, he yells. I have powerful friends. I'll get revenge on all of you. Grace and Ethan rush over, worried about my wound. Grandpa, you're bleeding a lot, Ethan says, his eyes full of tears. I've had worse, I try to reassure him, though the pain is considerable. An ambulance is on the way, April informs me. Hang on, Inspector. As the paramedic puts pressure on the wound, I look at my family. Despite the terror they just went through, I see relief on their faces. Carter can't hurt them anymore. In the ambulance, with Grace and Ethan by my side, I feel a strange sense of peace. The wound hurts, but it's a reminder that I'm alive, that we all survived this nightmare. Thank you, Dad, Grace whispers, squeezing my hand. For saving us. I always will, I reply, feeling the sedative they gave me start to kick in. I'll always be there for you. The days in the hospital pass slowly. The bullet grazed the bone in my shoulder, but did no serious damage. The doctors say I'll have full mobility after a few weeks of therapy. April visits me regularly, keeping me updated on the case. Carter is facing multiple charges: kidnapping, aggravated assault, child abuse, attempted homicide, obstruction of justice. The list is long. Camacho has also been formally charged with cover-up and evidence tampering. DA Moss has widened the investigation, uncovering a corruption network involving several city officials. One afternoon, while Ethan is helping me with the hospital food, I notice he's unusually thoughtful. What's on your mind, son? I was thinking about everything that happened, about how one man can cause so much harm. Some men confuse power with the right to abuse others, I tell him. It's a hard lesson, but an important one. I think I want to study law, he says suddenly. I want to help people like us, people facing injustice. I smile, feeling an immense sense of pride. You'll be an excellent lawyer, Ethan. It's all thanks to you, Grandpa. His eyes get misty. If I hadn't had the courage to call you that night. But you did, I interrupt. And that shows the kind of man you are. The door opens and Damas walks in. It's the first time I've seen her since that night at the precinct. She looks tired but satisfied. Inspector Anderson, I'm glad to see you recovering, Damas. What a surprise. I came to inform you personally. The judge has denied bail for Carter Vance. He will remain in custody until the trial. And Camacho, I ask, also in custody. He's cooperating. Providing information on the entire corruption network. The DA looks at Ethan. Your testimony will be crucial, young man. Do you think you can do it? Ethan nods firmly. I'm ready. Good. Because what you've been through, unfortunately, is not an isolated case. The DA sits on the edge of my bed. We're implementing a new protocol in the Justice Department precisely to prevent the manipulation of digital evidence in domestic violence cases. A new protocol? I ask, intrigued. Yes. She actually smiles slightly. We're calling it the Anderson Protocol in honor of you and your grandson. The news leaves me speechless. Ethan looks at me with shining eyes. Did you hear that, Grandpa? Your name is going to be part of the justice system. Our name? I correct him. This victory belongs to both of us. The DA gets up to leave. We'll need you both at the courthouse next week. Lieutenant Roberts will come pick you up. We'll be there, Ethan promises. When the DA leaves, Grace comes in with coffee and pastries from the hospital cafeteria. She's gotten some color back in her cheeks, though she still looks exhausted. Good news, she asks, noticing our expressions. The best, Ethan replies and tells her about the Anderson Protocol. Grace looks at me with a mix of gratitude and regret. Dad, I can never thank you enough. If you hadn't been there for us. But I was, I say simply, and I always will be. That night, after Grace and Ethan have left, I'm alone in the hospital room reflecting. I think about the terror of that late night call, the frustration with Camacho, the pain of the gunshot, but I also think about my grandson's courage, April's tenacity, and Damas's integrity. The system isn't perfect. It's full of Camachos and Carters, people who abuse their power. But there are also those who fight for justice, who refuse to look the other way. My phone vibrates on the nightstand. A text from April. Case officially closed. The trial will be quick with all the evidence we have. Get some rest, Inspector. You've earned it. I smile in the dim light of the room. Maybe my career as a cop ended years ago, but I never stopped fighting for what's right. And now that fight has taken on new meaning through Ethan. I close my eyes, feeling a true sense of peace for the first time in days. The pain in my shoulder is a small price to pay for my family's safety. And knowing our experience will help protect others fills me with a quiet pride. Tomorrow I'll be discharged. Tomorrow the real healing begins. Not just my physical wound, but the invisible wounds Carter left on Ethan and Grace. It will be a long road, but we'll walk it together as a family. And as I drift off to sleep, I think about all those people suffering in silence, trapped in cycles of abuse and fear. Maybe our story when it gets out will give them the courage to make that desperate call in the middle of the night to ask for help, to break the silence. Because sometimes all it takes is the courage to dial a number and say, I'm scared. Please help me. The courthouse hallways are crowded, but I walk with determination, leaning on a cane the doctors insisted I use for at least another month. The wound in my shoulder has healed well, though it still aches when the weather changes. Ethan walks beside me, tall and calm. In these past few weeks, he's matured so much that I sometimes hardly recognize the scared teenager who called me that night. Today is sentencing day. After a trial that lasted 3 weeks, the judge will announce the fate of Carter Vance and Victor Camacho. The evidence presented by the prosecution was overwhelming. The recovered videos, Mrs. Klein's recordings, Ethan's brave testimony, and the medical reports documenting the pattern of abuse. Nervous, I ask my grandson as we wait outside the courtroom. A little, he admits. Do you think he'll really pay for what he did? Damas did an exceptional job. And your testimony was flawless, Ethan. Firm, clear, without contradictions. Grace joins us wearing a formal suit. She's changed in these weeks, slowly getting back the strength she lost during her marriage to Carter. The divorce is moving forward, and she's started therapy to work through the guilt that still haunts her. The courtroom is packed, she informs us. There are several reporters. This case has gotten a lot of attention. It's true. What started as a domestic violence case turned into a wider investigation of municipal corruption. Several officials have already been indicted. The courtroom doors open and we go in. We sit in the front row behind the prosecution's table. April Roberts is already there reviewing documents. She nods at us. On the other side, Carter and Camacho's lawyers are talking quietly. Their clients haven't been brought in yet. All rise, the bailiff announces as Judge Reynolds enters. He's a man in his 60 seconds known for his fairness. You may be seated. Bring in the accused. Carter and Camacho are escorted in by guards, both wearing orange prison jumpsuits. Carter seems to have lost weight, and his usual arrogance is gone, replaced by a sullen expression. He looks at us briefly, and I think I see a flash of hatred in his eyes before he looks away. The judge adjusts his glasses and reviews the documents. After considering all the evidence presented in the jury's deliberations, this court is ready to pass sentence. The room is dead silent. I feel Ethan's hand tense up in mine. In the case of the state versus Carter Vance, the jury has found you guilty on all counts. Aggravated domestic violence, child abuse, obstruction of justice, kidnapping, and attempted homicide. The judge looks directly at Carter. This court sentences you to 22 years in prison with no possibility of parole for at least 15 years. A murmur goes through the room. Carter remains impassive as if he expected this. As for the accused Victor Camacho, the judge continues, having been found guilty of abuse of authority, cover-up, evidence tampering, and obstruction of justice. You are sentenced to 12 years in prison with possibility of review after 8 considering your cooperation with the DA's broader investigation. Camacho hangs his head visibly shaken. Furthermore, the judge adds, this court orders both defendants to pay restitution to the victims, the amount to be determined in a subsequent civil hearing. The gavel comes down, sealing their fate. Ethan exhales slowly. Grace sobs quietly beside me. Session adjourned, the judge declares. As the guards lead Carter and Camacho away, Damas comes over. Justice served, she says with professional satisfaction. The judge was as firm as we'd hoped. Thank you for everything, I say sincerely. Don't thank me. Thank your grandson. She looks at Ethan with admiration. His testimony was crucial, especially when he described the systematic pattern of abuse. Many teenagers wouldn't have had that clarity or courage. Ethan smiles shyly. I just told the truth. Sometimes that's the hardest thing to do. The DA checks her watch. I have to go. We have a press conference in 20 minutes about the case and the new protocol. Would you like to join me? I look at Ethan and Grace. I think we need a moment in private, Grace answers. It's been an intense morning. Of course, Lieutenant Roberts has all your information for the official Anderson Protocol presentation ceremony next week. When the DA leaves, we stay in the nearly empty courtroom for a few more minutes. How do you feel? I asked Ethan. Relieved, I think, but also strange. Part of me hoped he would apologize, show some kind of remorse. Men like Carter rarely admit their mistakes, I tell him. They always blame others. Do you think he'll change in prison? I don't know, son. But what's important is that he can't hurt you anymore. We leave the courthouse through a side door, avoiding the reporters. The day is bright and warm. Let's get something to eat. Grace suggests we need to celebrate this. At the restaurant, I look at my family. There's a lightness to them. I haven't seen in a long time. The shadows haven't disappeared, but they're less dense. Have you decided which university you're applying to? I ask Ethan. I'm looking at the state university, he replies. They have an excellent law program, and DA Moss said she could recommend me for a special mentorship program. That's a great opportunity, Grace says with pride. And I just got a new job. I start next month as a supervisor at my company. Everything is looking up, I say, raising my glass. To new beginnings. We toast, and for a moment, the past seems like a distant country we've managed to escape from. The following weeks settle into a new routine. My shoulder improves enough to ditch the cane. Ethan prepares his university applications with renewed enthusiasm. Grace spends more time at my house than in her own new apartment. One afternoon, I get a call from April. Inspector, we have a date for the official Anderson Protocol presentation. This Friday, 11 a.m. at the main auditorium. The DA would like you and Ethan to say a few words just to share your experience. When I tell Ethan, I see the excitement in his eyes. It's a chance to help other people who are going through the same thing. The day of the presentation, the auditorium is full. Police officers, DAs, judges. Damas explains the new protocol, a set of procedures to guarantee the integrity of digital evidence in domestic violence and child abuse cases. It includes metadata verification, a reinforced chain of custody, and independent forensic analysis. This protocol was born from a case that revealed serious flaws in our system. When it's my turn, I stand up. For 35 years, I served as a police inspector. I begin. I thought I knew the system, its strengths and weaknesses. But it was only when my own grandson was trapped in that system that I truly understood how vulnerable victims of domestic abuse really are. I briefly tell our story, highlighting the crucial support from people like April Roberts and Melinda Moss. When Ethan takes the microphone, his voice is clear and firm. He speaks directly to the young people present, describing the subtle signs of abuse he ignored, the psychological manipulation, the fear. If you are going through something similar, know that you are not alone, he says. There are people who will believe you. You just need to take that first step. Make that call like I did. His words are met with a deafening applause. Months pass. Ethan is accepted to the state university. Grace finalizes her divorce. I return to my old hobbies. One afternoon, almost a year after that night, I receive an official envelope. Carter's appeal has been denied. I don't mention it to Ethan or Grace. There's no reason to disturb the peace they've worked so hard to find. The next morning, Ethan comes over for breakfast. He's on break and now volunteers as a mentor for other young survivors. I have something to show you, he says, pulling a paper from his bag. It's an acceptance letter for a summer law program. This is impressive, Ethan. Deos recommended me. She says I have potential for the domestic violence prosecution unit. The path he chose isn't easy. But there's a strength in him, a resilience born from his own pain. You know what's strange, Grandpa? He says, sometimes I think about Carter, and I don't feel fear or hatred anymore. Just pity. That's part of healing. I tell him, do you still hate him? I consider it. Let's just say I don't waste my energy on him. I prefer to focus it on you, on our family, on the good things that came from this. And it's true. The Anderson Protocol is being adopted in other states. Ethan has found his calling. Grace has reclaimed her life. That weekend, we have a small celebration at my house. Grace brings food. Ethan brings friends from his support group. Mrs. Klein even comes bringing donuts. As I watch this new expanded family, April comes up to me. Did you know 3 other states are adopting the protocol? She says they're considering it at the national level. And I made Captain. Congratulations, Captain. Well deserved. Thanks, Inspector. I owe part of it to you and Ethan. As the party continues, I step onto the porch. The sky is turning orange. I think about the contrasts. While we celebrate, Carter serves his sentence. While Ethan builds a future, Camacho's career is destroyed. I don't feel satisfaction, just the certainty that justice, though imperfect and slow, finally arrived. Ethan comes out to find me. Everything okay, Grandpa? You're missing dessert. Just thinking, I say, putting my arm around his shoulders. About how proud I am of you, of the man you've become. Thanks to you, he replies, resting his head on my good shoulder. If I hadn't made that call, but you did, and that changed everything. We go back inside together. Grace greets us with a smile, a lightness in her face that reminds me of the young woman I knew before life hit her so hard. As we eat dessert, I think about all those phones ringing in the dead of night, about the trembling voices asking for help. The story that began with a desperate call didn't end with a fairy tale. Real life rarely offers those. But it gave us something just as valuable. The chance to turn pain into purpose, fear into determination, and a traumatic experience into a legacy that will protect many others. And maybe in the end, that's the most important victory of all.
That brings this story to an end. Honestly, a pretty interesting one if you ask me. Let me know your thoughts down below, and let's start with the next one right away. This one is titled,
My twin brother showed up covered in bruises. When I found out his wife's brothers were abusing him, we switched places and taught them a lesson they'll never forget. I was sitting at my kitchen table halfway through a cup of coffee that had gone cold when the knock came. It wasn't the confident rhythm of a friend dropping by or the hurried tap of a delivery driver. It was hesitant, almost apologetic, like whoever stood on the other side of that door wasn't sure they deserved to be there at all. I remember setting the mug down. The ceramic making a small sound against the wood and walking toward the entryway with a vague sense of unease already curling in my chest. When I opened the door, I didn't recognize him at first. Not because he looked so different from me. We're identical twins after all, mirrors of each other in almost every physical way, but because the person standing there seemed smaller somehow, diminished, like someone had taken my brother and hollowed him out from the inside. His shoulders were hunched forward, his head slightly bowed, and when he finally looked up at me, I saw the bruises. They weren't the kind of bruises you get from tripping over a curb or bumping into a corner of a table. These were deliberate, a dark purple bloom spread across his left cheekbone, the edges fading into sickly yellow-green. His bottom lip was split, crusted with dried blood. And when he shifted his weight, I noticed the way he winced, the way he held his ribs like they might crack open if he moved too quickly. His knuckles were raw, scraped clean of skin in places. And there was a haunted look in his eyes that I'd never seen before. Not even when we were kids, and things were hard. I stepped back without thinking, pulling the door wider, and he walked past me into the house like a ghost drifting through a life he no longer belonged to. I closed the door behind him, locked it, and turned to face him. He stood in the middle of my living room, arms wrapped around himself, staring at the floor. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched out, heavy and suffocating, until I finally managed to say his name. He flinched at the sound of it, and that small reaction, so unlike the confident, charismatic brother I'd known all my life, sent a cold spike of fear, straight through me. I asked him what happened. My voice came out rougher than I intended, sharp with worry and the beginnings of anger. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he sank down onto the edge of my couch, moving carefully like every part of him hurt. He rested his elbows on his knees and let his head hang forward. His hands clasped together so tightly that his knuckles turned white. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, broken and raw in a way that made my chest ache. He said it was her brothers, his wife's brothers. I felt my stomach drop. I knew them vaguely. Loud, overbearing men who dominated every family gathering, who spoke over everyone and acted like they owned whatever space they occupied. I'd always thought they were just the kind of people you tolerate because you have to, not because you want to. But this was something else entirely. My brother told me it started small. A shove here, a harsh word there, always framed as a joke, always dismissed as rough play between men. They mocked him at family dinners, belittled his career, called him soft, weak, not man enough. His wife laughed along with him sometimes, or worse, said nothing at all. Just looked away while they tore him down piece by piece. He thought he could endure it. He thought if he kept his head down, stayed quiet, proved himself somehow, they would eventually leave him alone. But it got worse. They started coming to the house unannounced, barging in like they owned the place, drinking his beer, eating his food, and making it clear that he had no say in his own home. They watched him when his wife wasn't around, testing boundaries, pushing harder each time. One night, the older brother shoved him into a wall when he asked them to leave. My brother tried to stand his ground, tried to tell them they couldn't just walk all over him, and that's when the first real beating happened. They cornered him in the garage, told him he was embarrassing the family, that he needed to learn his place. The younger brother held him while the older one hit him, methodical and cold, like he was teaching a lesson. They warned him not to tell anyone, especially not his wife. They said no one would believe him anyway. And if he tried to make it a problem, they'd make sure he lost everything. His marriage, his kid, his reputation. They'd paint him as unstable, violent, a liar. And because they were her brothers, because the family always closed ranks around their own, he knew they could do it. So he stayed silent. He took the bruises and the threats and the humiliation, and he tried to survive. He told me all of this in fragments, his voice cracking, his hands shaking. He said he didn't know what to do anymore. He was afraid all the time, afraid they would escalate, afraid they would hurt his child, afraid his wife would choose them over him if he forced her to pick a side. He said he felt trapped, like he was living in a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. And he didn't see a way out. That's when he looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate, and asked if I would help him. Not in some vague eventual way, but now. Immediately. He said he needed to disappear for a while, to get away and breathe and figure out what to do next. But he couldn't just leave. They'd go after him, or worse, they'd take it out on his kid. He needed someone to take his place just for a little while and just long enough to buy him time. And because we were twins, 'cause we'd spent our whole lives being mistaken for each other. Because no one outside of our immediate family could really tell us apart unless they looked closely, he thought maybe I could do it. He asked me to become him, to step into his life, where his face, endure what he'd been enduring while he slipped away somewhere safe and tried to heal. I should have said no. Any reasonable person would have. The plan was insane, dangerous, and legally questionable at best, but I didn't say no. I looked at my brother, my twin, my other half, the person I'd shared a womb with, who knew me better than anyone else in the world, and I saw how broken he was. I saw the bruises and the fear and the exhaustion, and I couldn't let him go back to that house alone. I couldn't let those men keep hurting him, grinding him down until there was nothing left. So, I said yes. I told him I would do it. I would trade places with him, move into his life, face his tormentors, and buy him the time he needed to escape. And more than that, I would make sure those bastards paid for what they'd done. I wouldn't just survive in his place. I would set a trap. I would gather evidence, expose their cruelty, and dismantle the power they held over him, piece by piece. I would teach them a lesson they'd never forget. We spent the next 2 days planning. My brother walked me through every detail of his life, the routines and rhythms that made up his daily existence. He told me about his work schedule, his wife's habits, the way she liked her coffee, the things she complained about, the words she used when she was angry. He described his child, a bright, curious 8-year-old daughter named Emma, who loved a drawing and asked too many questions and deserved so much better than to grow up in a house filled with fear. He explained the layout of the house, where things were kept, which neighbors were nosy, and which ones minded their own business. He gave me his phone, his wallet, his keys, and walked me through his passwords and PIN codes. He showed me the messages from her brothers, the vague threats and mocking jokes that filled his text history, and I felt my anger solidify into something cold and sharp. These men thought they were untouchable. They thought they could terrorize my brother without consequence. I was going to prove them wrong. We also talked about how to make the switch believable. The physical resemblance was easy. We'd always looked alike, down to the small scar above our right eyebrow and the crook in the way we smiled when we were nervous. But I needed to match his energy, his body language, the small gestures that made him who he was. I practiced the way he stood slightly slouched, weight on his back foot, like he was always ready to retreat. I mimicked the way he rubbed the back of his neck when he was stressed, the way he avoided eye contact when someone raised their voice. I learned to flinch at sudden movements, to keep my voice low and apologetic, to make myself smaller. It felt wrong, like I was putting on the skin of someone who'd been beaten down. But it was necessary. If I walked in there acting like myself, confident, confrontational, unwilling to take from anyone, they'd know something was off. I had to be him completely until the moment I was ready to strike. My brother also told me stories, memories that would help me understand the context of his life better. He told me about how he'd met Jennifer in college, how she'd been different then, independent, funny, someone who seemed to have her own mind. But after they got married and moved closer to her family, things changed. Her brothers had always been protective of her, borderline possessive, and they treated every man she dated like an interloper who needed to prove himself worthy. When my brother married her, Marcus and Derek decided he needed to be tested. Needed to understand that he was marrying into their family and would need to follow their rules. At first, it was just little things. Showing up uninvited, making decisions about family gatherings without consulting him, treating him like a child who needed guidance. Jennifer didn't push back 'cause this was normal to her. She'd grown up with her brothers running everything, making decisions, exerting control. She didn't see it as intrusive or inappropriate. She saw it as family being close. Over time, the dynamic became more toxic. Marcus, who was the oldest, established himself as the patriarch of the extended family after their father had a stroke and became less involved. He made it clear that he expected difference, that his word was law. Derek, the middle child, fell in line and became Marcus' enforcer, the one who carried out his wishes and backed him up. Jennifer, as the youngest and only daughter, had always been treated as someone who needed protection and guidance. When my brother tried to assert himself, tried to establish boundaries or make decisions about his own household, Marcus and Derek saw it as insubordination. They started punishing him for it socially at first, making jokes at his expense, excluding him from conversations, treating him like he didn't matter. Then it escalated to physical intimidation, and eventually to outright violence. My brother told me about the first time Marcus hit him. It was at a family barbecue. And my brother had made the mistake of disagreeing with Marcus about something trivial. Sports, politics, something that shouldn't have mattered. Marcus had gotten angry, his face flushing red, and he'd grabbed my brother by the shirt and shoved him hard against the side of the house. Nobody intervened. Derek laughed. Jennifer looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. Marcus leaned in close and told my brother that he needed to learn respect, that he was lucky to be part of this family and that if he didn't fall in line, there would be consequences. My brother had been so shocked, so humiliated that he didn't know how to respond. He just nodded and apologized and tried to smooth things over. That was the moment he told me when he realized he was trapped. If his own wife wouldn't defend him, if the family would just watch while he was assaulted, then who would help him? The abuse became routine after that. Marcus and Derek would come over several times a week and there was always some pretext. They were checking in on their sister. They wanted to borrow tools. They were just hanging out. But really, they were asserting dominance, making sure my brother understood his place. They'd criticize everything about him. His job, his appearance, his parenting, his masculinity. They'd take things from the house without asking. They'd eat dinner without offering to contribute. They'd stay late into the night drinking and getting louder. And my brother would have to sit there and take it because any objection would be met with mockery or violence. Emma learned to disappear when they came over to retreat to her room and stay quiet. She developed anxiety around loud male voices, around unexpected visitors, around conflict of any kind. My brother hated what his daughter was learning. Hated that she was growing up thinking this was normal. But he didn't know how to stop it without making everything worse. On the third day, we made the switch. My brother packed a small bag with clothes and essentials, and I drove him to a friend's cabin 3 hours away, a place no one else knew about. The cabin belonged to an old college buddy of ours who had moved overseas for work and rarely used it. My brother had the keys and knew the alarm codes, and it was remote enough that he could disappear completely. He would stay there off the grid while I took his place. Before I left him, I made him promise to see a doctor, to get his injuries checked out, and to start thinking about what came next. Divorce, custody, restraining orders, whatever he needed to do to protect himself and Emma. He nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes, the fear that none of it would matter, that the system wouldn't protect him, that her family would find a way to win. I squeezed his shoulder and told him to trust me. I told him I would handle it, that by the time I was done, Marcus and Derek would regret ever laying a hand on him. Then I got back in the car and drove to his house. My heart pounding, my mind racing through everything I needed to remember. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw the lights on inside, warm and familiar, a picture of suburban normalcy that hid so much ugliness beneath the surface. I took a deep breath, grabbed his keys, and walked up to the front door. This was it. I was stepping into his life, into his pain, and I wouldn't come out until I'd burned it all down. His wife was in the kitchen when I walked in, standing at the counter with her back to me, chopping vegetables for dinner. She didn't turn around, just called out a distracted greeting, asking where I'd been. I forced myself to match my brother's soft, deferential tone, and told her I'd run some errands. She made a non-committal sound, still not looking at me, and I realized with a sinking feeling that this was normal for them. This distance, this lack of connection. She didn't look at him 'cause she didn't need to. He was just a background presence in his own home, someone to be tolerated rather than noticed. I watched her for a moment, searching for some sign of the person my brother had fallen in love with. But all I saw was someone who had checked out long ago, who had chosen comfort over compassion. I asked where Emma was, and she gestured vaguely toward the living room, saying she was watching TV. I walked past her, my jaw tight, and found my niece curled up on the couch, tablet in hand, absorbed in some brightly colored cartoon. She glanced up when I entered, gave me a small smile, and went back to her screen. I sat down next to her, close, but not too close, and asked how her day was. She shrugged and said it was fine, her voice flat, and I realized she'd learned the same survival tactic as my brother. Keep your head down. Don't make waves. Stay quiet. Broke my heart. That first evening passed intense normally. Jennifer made dinner and we ate at the table in near silence. Emma picked at her food and Jennifer scrolled through her phone and I tried to blend into the background the way my brother would have. After dinner, I helped Emma with her homework sitting at the kitchen table while she worked through math problems. She was smart, quick with numbers, but she kept checking the front door nervously like she was waiting for something bad to happen. I asked her if she was okay and she said she was fine in that same flat voice, the voice of a child who'd learned that expressing fear or discomfort didn't help anything. I wanted to tell her that things were going to change, that she wouldn't have to be afraid much longer, but I couldn't. Not yet. Any deviation from my brother's normal behavior might tip off Jennifer or alert Marcus and Derek that something was different. So, I just helped her finish her homework, told her she'd done a good job, and let her retreat to her room for the night. That night, I learned the full extent of the nightmare my brother had been living. Around 8 o'clock, I heard the sound of a truck pulling up outside, the engine rumbling loud and aggressive. My pulse spiked, and I glanced toward the window, already knowing who it was. Her brothers. The door burst open without a knock. And they walked in like they owned the place, loud and laughing, tracking mud across the floor. The older one, Marcus, was built like a linebacker, all broad shoulders and thick arms with a buzz cut and a permanent sneer. The younger one, Derek, was leaner, but just as intimidating, with a sharp jawline and cold eyes that seemed to enjoy other people's discomfort. They headed straight for the fridge, grabbing beers without asking. And Marcus called out to my brother's wife, asking what was for dinner. She answered from the kitchen, her tone light and accommodating, telling them there were leftovers they could heat up. I felt a surge of disgust. She knew they were here. She welcomed it. They settled into the living room, sprawling across the furniture, and Marcus looked at me, his gaze sliding over me with casual contempt. He asked where I'd been all day, his tone mocking like I was a child being questioned by an authority figure. I kept my voice even and said I'd been out running errands. Derek laughed a harsh barking sound and said it looked like Marcus agreed, adding that I should get some rest, maybe hit the gym, stop being such a. They both laughed at that, and I forced myself to stay still, to keep my expression neutral, even though every instinct screamed at me to tell them to off and get out of this house. But I wasn't here as myself. I was here as my brother, the person they'd broken. And I needed them to believe the act. I watched them carefully that first night, cataloging their behavior, their patterns, the way they interacted with each other and with Jennifer. Marcus was clearly the alpha, the one who made decisions and expected others to fall in line. He spoke in declaratives, not questions, and he had a way of filling space that made everyone else shrink. Derek was his shadow, backing up everything Marcus said, laughing at his jokes, and forcing his will. Together, they created an atmosphere of dominance and intimidation that was suffocating. Jennifer moved around them like a waitress in a restaurant, bringing them snacks and drinks, laughing at their jokes, never challenging or contradicting them. I saw the way she'd glance at me occasionally, checking to make sure I wasn't causing any problems, wasn't saying or doing anything that might upset her brothers. The message was clear. Keep your head down. Don't make waves. And maybe they'll leave soon. They stayed until after midnight. They watched sports, drank my brother's beer, and made themselves completely at home. At one point, Marcus got up and went into the kitchen, rummaging through the pantry like he lived there. He found a bag of chips and brought it back to the living room, tearing it open and eating handfuls while dropping crumbs all over the couch. When I got up to get a glass of water, dear Eric called after me, telling me to bring him another beer. While I was up, I bit back the refusal that rose in my throat and did it, handing him the beer with a neutral expression. He took it without thanking me. And Marcus smirked like my compliance was amusing. This was a test. I realized everything they did was a test, a way of reinforcing the hierarchy, of making sure I knew I was at the bottom. When they finally left, the house felt both emptier and heavier. Jennifer cleaned up the mess they'd made without comment, and I helped her, wanting to appear normal, wanting to blend in. She didn't say anything about their visit. Didn't acknowledge the hours of invasion and disrespect we just endured. It was like it hadn't happened, or like it was so routine that it didn't warrant discussion. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her how she could allow this, how she could watch her husband be treated like garbage in his own home and say nothing, do nothing. But I couldn't. Not yet. So, I just finished cleaning, said good night, and went to bed in the guest room. My brother had warned me that he and Jennifer hadn't shared a bed in months. Another casualty of the toxic dynamic in the house. I lay awake for a long time that first night, staring at the ceiling, processing everything I'd observed. The casual cruelty, the entitlement, the way Jennifer enabled it all. I thought about Emma, asleep in her room, growing up in this environment. I thought about my brother, 3 hours away in that cabin, probably unable to sleep, worried about what was happening here. I thought about Marcus and Derek, comfortable and smug, certain that they'd broken my brother completely, that he would never fight back. They had no idea what was coming. I pulled out my phone and started making notes, everything I'd observed, everything they'd said, the timeline of their visit. This was just the beginning. I was going to document everything, build a case so thorough that there would be no escape for them. And then I was going to destroy them. Over the next few days, I observed them carefully, learning their patterns, their cruelty, the way they operated. They came by almost every evening, sometimes staying for hours, drinking and eating and making themselves at home. They bossed Jennifer around, treating her like a servant, and she complied without complaint, sometimes even laughing along with their jokes. They ignored Emma most of the time, which was a mercy. But occasionally, Marcus would ruffle her hair too roughly or make some comment about her being soft, and I'd see the way my niece flinched, the way she retreated into herself. I started to understand how my brother had ended up so broken. This wasn't just physical abuse. It was psychological warfare, a constant erosion of dignity and autonomy. They made him feel powerless in his own home, and everyone around him enabled it. The first time they hit me, I was ready. It happened on the fourth night. Marcus was drunk and drunker than usual, and he'd been needling me all evening, making comments about my job, my appearance, my worth as a man. I kept my responses short and non-confrontational, but it didn't matter. He wanted a reaction, and when he didn't get one, he decided to escalate. He stood up abruptly, crossed the room, and shoved me hard in the chest. I stumbled back, catching myself against the wall, and he stepped closer, his face inches from mine. He asked if I had a problem, his breath hot and sour with alcohol. I said no, keeping my voice steady, and he shoved me again harder this time. Dear Eric laughed from the couch, egging him on. Then Marcus hit me, a sharp backhand across the face that made my ears ring. I tasted blood, felt the sting spread across my cheek, and forced myself to do nothing. I stood there head down, hands at my sides, playing the part of the broken man they expected. Marcus called me pathetic and walked away satisfied. Jennifer had watched the whole thing from the kitchen doorway. She didn't say a word. She just turned and went back to washing dishes. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat in the bathroom with my phone recording a voice memo to myself. I described what had happened, the details of the assault, the witnesses who did nothing. My voice was steady as I spoke, clinical almost. But inside I was shaking with rage. Not at the pain. I'd been hit before, had been in fights, knew how to take a punch, but at the injustice of it, at the casual cruelty, at the fact that this had been my brother's reality for so long. I knew I needed evidence, not just for the legal system, but for myself, to remind me why I was doing this, to keep the anger focused and controlled. Over the following weeks, I built a careful, methodical record of their behavior. I recorded their conversations when they didn't know I was listening, capturing threats and insults and admissions of past violence. I took photos of the bruises they left on me, new ones that matched my brother's, and timestamped them. I saved every text message, every voicemail, every piece of communication that revealed their cruelty. I also started digging into their lives, learning about their jobs, their reputations, the people who enabled them. Marcus worked for a construction company called Apex Builders, where he was a foreman known for being a hard ass, but also for cutting corners and intimidating workers. I started casually asking questions about his work when he'd come over acting interested, and he'd brag about how he ran his crews. How he didn't take from anyone, how he'd fire people on the spot if they didn't do exactly what he said. He told stories about screaming at workers, about threatening them, about times he'd gotten physical when someone questioned his authority. I recorded all of it, every incriminating word. Derek was a loan officer at First National Bank, someone who presented a clean, professional image, but had a history of shady dealings that his family helped him cover up. He was more careful than Marcus, less likely to openly brag. But after a few drinks, he'd let things slip. Comments about loans he'd approved for friends even though they didn't qualify. About kickbacks he'd received. About times he'd pressured vulnerable clients into deals that benefited him. I recorded those conversations, too, building a file that would eventually destroy his career. I also started building relationships with people who might help me when the time came. There was a neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, an older woman, who lived 2 houses down and had always seemed kind but watchful. I made a point of talking to her when I saw her outside, mentioning in passing how stressful things had been at home. She gave me a long searching look. Her dark eyes full of concern, and said, if I ever needed anything, I should let her know. She had that quality that some older women have, that grandmother energy that makes you feel like you can trust them, like they've seen enough of life to understand complicated situations without judgment. I thanked her and filed that connection away. At my brother's workplace, a mid-sized accounting firm called Patterson & Associates, I identified a co-worker named Sam who had always been friendly. Someone who seemed decent and observant. Sam was around my brother's age with an easy smile and a reputation for being the guy who checked in on people, who noticed when someone was struggling. I let slip carefully during a conversation at the coffee machine that things were tough at home. Sam's expression shifted to one of genuine concern, and they offered to grab coffee sometime if I needed to talk. I accepted, planting seeds that I knew I'd need later. I was building a network of witnesses, people who would remember my brother's struggles, who would be willing to speak up when the time came. The abuse continued, escalating in small increments. They hit me more often, always when Jennifer wasn't in the room or when she was close enough to hear, but chose to ignore it. They mocked me relentlessly, called me weak, stupid, worthless. Marcus had a particularly cruel habit of comparing me to other men in their social circle, pointing out how much more successful or masculine or capable they were. Derek developed a game where he'd send me increasingly degrading text messages throughout the day, ordering me to do things, have dinner ready by 7, make sure there's beer in the fridge, tell Jennifer I'm bringing someone by tomorrow, treating me like a servant in my own home. I saved every single message, screenshots carefully organized by date and time, building a digital paper trail that would be impossible to deny. They also started messing with the house itself, asserting ownership in physical ways. Marcus would rearrange furniture when he came over, moving things to different rooms, claiming he was fixing the layout. Derek would take things, tools from the garage, electronics, even clothes. And when I'd noticed they were missing and mention it, he'd deny taking them or claim I'd said he could borrow them. It was gaslighting, making me question my own memory and perception. And I realized this was something they'd been doing to my brother for a long time. I started taking inventory of everything in the house, documenting what belonged where, so I'd have evidence of their theft. I also installed a small hidden camera in the living room, tucked behind a picture frame, angled to capture the main seating area. It was a risk. If they found it, they'd know something was up. But I needed video evidence, not just audio. I needed footage of them hitting me, of them stealing, of the casual way they invaded and dominated the space. Marcus' violence became more calculated as the weeks went on. He started hitting me in places that wouldn't show as easily. Ribs, back, shoulders. He'd corner me in the garage or the basement, places where the sound wouldn't carry to Emma's room, and he'd take his time. Derek would stand watch, sometimes recording on his phone, laughing at my attempts to protect myself. They made it a game, seeing how much they could hurt me without leaving obvious marks, testing the boundaries of what they could get away with. Once Marcus brought one of his construction buddies over, a guy named Tony, who was just as brutal. They took turns 3 against 1. And when it was over, Marcus leaned down close to my ear and said, "This is what happens when you forget your place." Remember that? I remembered. I remembered everything, and I recorded it all. The hidden camera had captured the entire assault, and I'd managed to keep my phone in my pocket recording audio. It was brutal to watch later, to see myself taking those hits, but it was necessary. This was evidence that would put them away. Emma started showing more obvious signs of the stress as the weeks went on. She became quieter, more withdrawn. Her drawings, which had been bright and imaginative, turned dark. Stick figures with frowning faces, houses with no doors, rain that never stopped. One drawing particularly gutted me. It showed a small figure labeled me standing far away from 2 large figures labeled bad men, with another figure labeled daddy sitting on the ground with X's for eyes. When I asked her about it, sitting beside her at the kitchen table trying to keep my voice gentle, she just shrugged and said she didn't like it when Uncle Marcus and Uncle Derek visited. She said they were loud and mean and they made Daddy sad. She looked up at me with those big, worried eyes and asked, "Why do they come here if they're not nice?" I didn't have an answer that an 8-year-old would understand. Didn't know how to explain that her mother allowed it, that her father had felt powerless to stop it. So, I just hugged her carefully, mindful of my bruised ribs, and told her that things were going to get better soon. I promised her, and I meant it. I took photos of her drawings, added them to my evidence file with dates and context notes. This wasn't just about physical abuse anymore. This was about documenting the psychological damage being inflicted on a child. Evidence that would be crucial in the custody battle I knew was coming. Jennifer's role in all of this became clearer the longer I lived in that house. She wasn't just passively allowing the abuse. She was actively enabling it. I started paying closer attention to her interactions with her brothers, to the things she said and didn't say. When Marcus would make a cruel joke at my expense during dinner, she'd laugh, not just a polite chuckle, but genuine amusement. When Derek would text her asking if her husband was behaving, she'd text back things like, "Trying to," or, "You know how he is," with laughing emojis. I found those messages one night when she left her phone on the bathroom counter while she was in the shower. I took screenshots, my hands shaking with anger, and sent them to my own phone before deleting the evidence that I'd accessed her device. She was in on it. She might not have been throwing the punches, but she was holding the door open for the people who did. I started documenting her role, too. I recorded conversations where she dismissed my concerns, where she told me I was being too sensitive, where she suggested that maybe if I just tried harder to get along with her brothers, things would be better. One night, after Marcus had shoved me hard enough to knock over a lamp, I tried to talk to her about it. Once we were alone, I said carefully, trying to sound defeated rather than angry, "This is getting out of hand. Your brothers are..." She cut me off before I could finish. "They're just playing around. You take everything so seriously. They're family. They're allowed to tease you." I pushed a little further, asked her if she really thought it was okay that they hit me, and she rolled her eyes. "Hit you? God, you're dramatic. Marcus barely touched you. You need to toughen up." Every word was captured on my phone, which was in my shirt pocket recording. I was building a comprehensive picture of her complicity, evidence that she was an active participant in my brother's torment, not an innocent bystander. I also started digging into her relationship with her family, trying to understand how this dynamic had formed, what made her choose her brothers over her husband. I asked her questions, pretending to be interested in family history, and she opened up more than I expected. She told me about how her brothers had always protected her growing up, how they'd scared off boys they didn't approve of, how they'd fought anyone who gave her trouble. She spoke about it with fondness, nostalgia, like their overprotective behavior was romantic rather than controlling. She said that when she introduced my brother to her family, Marcus and Derek had been skeptical, worried that he wasn't good enough for her. She'd had to convince them to give him a chance to accept him into the family. But she said with a sigh, He'd never really proven himself, never really fit in the way she'd hoped he would. The subtext was clear. My brother had failed some tests that her brothers had set, and now he was paying the price. She saw their abuse as his fault, as something he'd brought on himself by not being man enough to earn their respect. That realization made something harden inside me. Jennifer wasn't a victim. She wasn't confused or manipulated. She had made a conscious choice to prioritize her brother's approval over her husband's safety, over her daughter's well-being. She'd chosen the family she came from over the family she'd created. And she'd done it knowing full well what that meant. I stopped feeling any sympathy for her after that. Whatever happened to her in the legal proceedings to come, she'd earned it. By the 6th week, I had amassed a staggering amount of evidence. Hours of audio recordings, dozens of photos, hundreds of text messages and emails. Video footage from the hidden camera showing assaults, theft, and the general atmosphere of intimidation. I had witnessed statements from Mrs. Alvarez, who had heard the shouting and seen Marcus' truck at odd hours, who had noticed that my brother looked increasingly beaten down and afraid. I had testimony from Sam at work, who had noticed the bruises and the changes in my brother's demeanor, who had documentation of the days I'd called in sick because I was too injured to come in. I had medical records, too. I'd made a point of going to a walk-in clinic after one particularly brutal beating, the one where Tony had been involved. I'd claimed I'd fallen down the stairs, but the doctor had been skeptical. She documented injuries that were inconsistent with a simple fall. Contusions on both sides of my rib cage, defensive wounds on my forearms, facial injuries that suggested I'd been struck multiple times. She'd actually pulled me aside and asked directly if someone was hurting me, if I was safe at home. I denied it, playing the role of the embarrassed, ashamed victim, but I'd also requested copies of all the medical records and photos they'd taken. She'd given them to me with a knowing look and a card for a domestic violence hotline. I thanked her and added everything to my evidence file. I also had financial records showing a pattern of theft and exploitation. Marcus and Derek had been helping themselves to my brother's money for months, making withdrawals from his account. They somehow had his ATM card probably taken from his wallet during one of their visits and charging things to his credit cards. When I started tracking it, I found thousands of dollars in unauthorized charges and withdrawals over the past year. I documented every transaction, cross-referenced them with dates when Marcus and Derek had been at the house, and built a timeline that showed systematic financial abuse. This was important because it established a pattern of exploitation beyond just the physical violence, showing that they saw my brother as someone they could use and victimize in multiple ways. I also started reaching out to people in their professional lives carefully and anonymously at first. I contacted Marcus's employer through a general ethics hotline that Apex Builders had set up after some previous controversy. I provided specific dates and incidents where Marcus had demonstrated violent behavior or safety violations on job sites, information I'd gathered from his own bragging. I didn't identify myself, just framed it as a concerned citizen who had witnessed troubling behavior. I mentioned that Marcus had a history of violence that extended to his personal life, that he'd been caught on recording threatening and assaulting someone, and that the company might want to investigate before they faced liability. The hotline operator took detailed notes and assured me that the complaint would be investigated. I gave them just enough information to be credible, but not so much that they could trace it back to me. I did the same with Derek's bank. First National had a corporate compliance department that took ethics violations seriously, especially in the wake of various banking scandals that had made national news. I sent a detailed complaint through their anonymous reporting system outlining Derek's questionable practices, the loans he'd bragged about approving for friends who didn't qualify, the kickbacks, the pressure tactics on vulnerable clients. I included screenshots of text messages where Derek had discussed these things, his words incriminating him in his own voice. I also mentioned that Derek had a history of violent behavior in his personal life, including assault charges that were pending, and suggested that the bank might want to investigate whether someone with such poor judgment and impulse control should be in a position of trust with clients' money. The complaint was flagged as high priority, and I later learned through mutual acquaintances that Derek had been called in for questioning by internal affairs. I was building a web of consequences, making sure that when everything came out, it wouldn't just be a matter of criminal charges. Their entire lives would unravel. Their careers, their reputations, their social standing, everything would collapse under the weight of their own actions. I wanted them to lose everything they valued, to feel the same helplessness and desperation that my brother had felt, to understand that there are consequences for cruelty. The 7th week brought a new level of cruelty that crossed a line I hadn't expected them to cross. Marcus decided that I needed to be taught a lesson in front of Emma. It was a Saturday afternoon and Jennifer had gone out shopping with friends, leaving me alone with Emma. I should have known they'd show up. They always seemed to have a sixth sense for when Jennifer was gone, when there were no witnesses they cared about. And Marcus and Derek arrived around 2 o'clock, already drunk, even though it was early afternoon. They came in loud and aggressive. And Emma immediately tensed up, setting down the books she'd been reading and watching them with wide, frightened eyes. I told Emma to go to her room, trying to keep my voice calm, but Marcus told her to stay put. He said she needed to see something, needed to learn something about her father. He started with the usual insults, calling me weak and pathetic, but there was an edge to his voice that day, something darker than usual. He grabbed me by the shirt and slammed me against the wall hard enough that a picture frame fell and shattered. Emma looked up from where she'd frozen on the couch, her eyes wide with terror, and Marcus glanced at her with a cruel smile. He said, "Watch this, kid. This is what happens to men who don't have a spine." Then he hit me, a closed fist to the stomach that drove the air from my lungs. I collapsed to my knees, gasping, and Emma screamed. She ran toward us crying, begging Marcus to stop, her small hands pulling at his arm. For a terrible moment, I thought he might hit her, too. I saw the anger flash in his eyes, saw his hand twitch, and I lunged forward despite the pain, positioning myself between them. Derek, who had been watching from the doorway with that sick smile on his face, told Emma to go to her room. She refused, standing between me and Marcus, tears streaming down her face, her whole body shaking. "Leave my daddy alone," she screamed, her voice breaking. "You're bad. You're bad men." Marcus looked down at her, and for a moment, the mask slipped. I saw something in his face. Uncertainty maybe, or the faintest hint of shame, but then it hardened again. He pointed at her and said, "You shut your mouth and go to your room right now or your daddy's going to get it worse." Emma looked at me terrified, and I told her quietly, trying to keep my voice steady, despite the pain screaming through my stomach, to go to her room and close the door. She didn't want to leave. I could see the conflict on her face, but finally, she ran upstairs, sobbing. I heard her door slam and lock, and I pulled myself to my feet, positioning myself at the bottom of the stairs so that if they went after her, they'd have to go through me. Marcus called me pathetic again, made a few more threats about what would happen if I kept acting like a little, and finally, they left. Derek trailing after his brother, both of them laughing like they'd just done something hilarious instead of traumatizing a child. The moment their truck pulled away, I went upstairs and knocked softly on Emma's door. She opened it, her face red and swollen from crying, and she threw her arms around me, sobbing into my chest. I held her carefully, my bruised stomach aching, and let her cry. When she finally pulled back, she looked up at me and asked a question that broke my heart. "Why don't you make them stop, Daddy? Why do you let them hurt you?" I didn't have a good answer. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that her father felt trapped, powerless, afraid? How do you explain that sometimes adults fail to protect themselves because they're scared of making things worse? I told her that sometimes grown-ups have problems that are complicated, but that I was working on fixing things and that she wouldn't have to be scared much longer. I promised her that Uncle Marcus and Uncle Derek wouldn't be able to hurt us anymore soon. She asked how I knew, and I told her to trust me. She nodded, wanting to believe, and I felt the weight of that promise settle on my shoulders. I had to end this. I couldn't let this continue for one more day. That night after Emma was asleep, I reviewed the footage from the hidden camera. It had captured everything. Marcus slamming me against the wall, the picture frame falling, him hitting me, Emma screaming and running to protect me. The pure terror on her face. It also captured the moment when Marcus had looked at Emma with anger, when it seemed entirely possible he might hurt her, too. The audio picked up everything he'd said, including the threat that her daddy would get it worse if she didn't go to her room. It was damning evidence, the kind of thing that would destroy any remaining sympathy someone might have for Marcus. That would make it crystal clear that this wasn't just about adult conflict, but about a child being traumatized and endangered. I made multiple copies of that footage, uploading it to secure cloud storage, and I knew it was time to move to the final phase of my plan. The next morning, I reached out to my lawyer. Her name was Rebecca Chen, and she specialized in domestic violence and family law. I'd contacted her a few weeks into the swap, laying the groundwork, having an initial consultation where I'd explained the situation and shown her some preliminary evidence. At that meeting, she'd been cautious but intrigued, warning me about the risks of what I was doing, but also acknowledging that if I could document everything thoroughly, I'd have a strong case. Now I was ready to move forward. We met at her office on a weekday morning and I brought everything. My laptop with the recordings and video footage, my phone with thousands of messages and photos, the medical records, printed statements from witnesses, financial documentation showing the theft, all of it organized into clearly labeled folders and files. Rebecca went through it methodically, and I watched her expression shift from professional interest to genuine shock to what looked like anger on my brother's behalf. When she finished reviewing everything, she sat back in her chair and looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, This is one of the most thoroughly documented cases of domestic abuse I've ever seen. The evidence is overwhelming. We can absolutely prosecute this, and I'm confident we'll win." She paused, then added, "What you've done, stepping into your brother's life, taking this abuse, gathering this evidence, it's extraordinary. It's also incredibly dangerous, and I'm glad you're ready to end it now before something worse happens." We discussed strategy for the next 2 hours. She outlined the legal pathway, criminal charges for assault and battery, multiple counts since there were multiple documented incidents, restraining orders not just against Marcus and Derek, but potentially against Jennifer as well, given her documented complicity, emergency custody arrangements for Emma to get her out of that house and into my brother's sole care immediately, and grounds for divorce on behalf of my brother with evidence that would make it nearly impossible for Jennifer to contest the terms or fight for custody. Rebecca explained that the strength of the evidence meant we could move quickly, that we could get emergency protective orders within days and have Marcus and Derek arrested within the week. But I wanted more than that. I told her about my plan for the family dinner for the public exposure, for making sure that everyone who had enabled Marcus and Derek saw exactly who they were. Rebecca was hesitant at first, worried about the risks, about the possibility of violence if we confronted them directly. But I convinced her that it was necessary, that legal consequences weren't enough, that I wanted social consequences, too. I wanted their reputations destroyed, their enablers forced to reckon with what they'd been supporting. Their facade of respectability ripped away in front of everyone who mattered to them. Finally, Rebecca agreed, but on certain conditions. First, we'd coordinate with the police, making sure they were on standby nearby in case things escalated. Second, we'd get the emergency protective orders and arrest warrants ready beforehand, so they'd be in effect immediately after the dinner regardless of what happened. Third, Emma would be safely away from the house, staying with a trusted adult before any confrontation occurred. And fourth, I'd wear a wire during the dinner, recording everything as backup in case they tried to claim later that things hadn't happened the way we said. I agreed to all of it. We set a date for the dinner, 2 weeks out, enough time to finalize all the legal paperwork and coordinate with law enforcement. In the days leading up to the dinner, I prepared meticulously. I copied all my evidence onto multiple USB drives, made sure everything was backed up in secure cloud storage that Marcus and Derek couldn't access, even if they somehow figured out what was happening, and tried to destroy evidence. I briefed Rebecca on exactly what I planned to say and show, and she helped me edit together a presentation, a carefully curated compilation of audio recordings, photos, video footage, and documents that would make it impossible for anyone to deny what had been happening. We timed it to be about 20 minutes long, enough to be thorough without losing people's attention, enough to be devastating without being gratuitous. I also coordinated with the police. Rebecca put me in touch with Detective Sarah Morrison, who worked in the domestic violence unit. I met with her at the police station bringing my evidence and watched as she reviewed it with the same shocked expression Rebecca had shown. Detective Morrison asked questions, thorough ones, making sure she understood the timeline and the context. She was particularly interested in the video footage from the incident with Emma, watching it multiple times, her jaw tight with anger. When she finished reviewing everything, she told me that this was a clear-cut case, that Marcus and Derek would absolutely be arrested and charged, and that given the severity and documentation, they'd likely be held without bail initially. She agreed to have officers positioned near the house during the dinner, ready to intervene if things turned violent and ready to execute the arrest warrants immediately after the confrontation. I also made arrangements for Emma's safety. I talked to Mrs. Alvarez, explaining without going into too much detail that there was going to be a difficult family situation and asking if Emma could stay with her for the night. Mrs. Alvarez agreed immediately, asking no questions, just telling me that Emma would be safe and cared for. I told Emma it was a special sleepover, making it sound fun and exciting, and she was delighted. She loved Mrs. Alvarez, who baked cookies and told stories and treated her like a beloved grandchild. On the day of the dinner, I'd drop Emma off at Mrs. Alvarez's house in the afternoon, ensuring she was far away before anyone arrived. I sent out the invitations to the dinner, carefully worded to sound genuine and conciliatory. I called Marcus and Derek personally, putting on my best defeated apologetic voice, and told them I wanted to make amends, that I realized I'd been difficult and wanted to do better, that I hope we could all come together and work things out. Marcus ate it up, his voice dripping with condescension as he said he was glad I was finally seeing sense, that it was about time I stopped being such a little and started acting like a man. Derek was equally smug, making jokes about how maybe there was hope for me after all. I invited their parents, too. Marcus and Derek's mother, Linda, and father, Robert, along with Jennifer's aunts and uncles, some mutual friends, basically anyone who'd been part of the social circle that had enabled this abuse or turned a blind eye to it. I wanted them all there. I wanted them all to see. Jennifer was thrilled about the dinner. She saw it as me finally surrendering, finally accepting my place, finally giving up on the idea that I deserved to be treated with respect or dignity. She threw herself into planning, deciding on menu items, fussing over details, excited to show her family that her husband had finally been broken into compliance. It was sickening to watch, but I played along, agreeing to everything she suggested, acting like the beaten-down spouse she thought I'd become. Inside, I was counting down the hours until I could rip away the mask she'd been hiding behind, until I could show everyone exactly what kind of person she was. The night of the dinner arrived. I dropped Emma off at Mrs. Alvarez's house in the afternoon around 3 o'clock. Mrs. Z. Alvarez gave me a long searching look when she answered the door, and I had the feeling she knew this wasn't really just about a special sleepover, that she understood something significant was happening. She squeezed my shoulder, told me to be careful, and said that Emma could stay as long as needed. I thanked her, gave Emma a tight hug, and told her I loved her. She hugged me back and said she loved me, too. And the pure innocence in her voice, the trust, made me even more determined to see this through. This was for her. All of it was for her. I went back to the house and started cooking, following Jennifer's elaborate menu plans. By 6 o'clock, the house was ready. Table set, food prepared, the hidden camera's battery fully charged, the projector I'd set up in the corner, ready to go, and my phone fully charged and ready to record everything. I'd also been fitted with a wire by Detective Morrison earlier that day, a small microphone taped to my chest under my shirt, transmitting everything to a recording device, and also to the police who were positioned 2 blocks away. I was ready. Everything was in place. All that remained was for the guests to arrive and for me to spring the trap I'd spent 7 weeks building. People started arriving around 6:30. Marcus and Derek came together as always, loud and boisterous, carrying cases of beer like they were doing us a favor. Jennifer greeted them with hugs and laughter, and they settled into the living room like kings holding court. Their parents arrived next, Linda looking elegant and composed. Robert gruff and distant and as usual. Jennifer's Aunt Carol and Uncle Mike came along with 2 couples who were mutual friends. People who'd been at various family gatherings where I'd been humiliated and had said nothing. The house filled with noise and conversation. Everyone in good spirits, completely unaware of what was coming. Dinner went smoothly. Everyone eating and drinking and talking. I played the perfect host, making sure glasses stayed full, answering questions politely, being differential and unobtrusive. Marcus made several jokes at my expense during the meal, and everyone laughed, including Jennifer, and Derek shared a story about a time at a family barbecue when Marcus had put me in my place, and people chuckled like it was funny rather than horrifying. I smiled tightly and said nothing, just kept filling drinks and clearing plates. Inside I was coiled tight as a spring, my heart pounding, adrenaline making my hands want to shake. I forced myself to breathe slowly, to stay calm, to wait for the right moment. After dinner, I suggested we all move to the living room for dessert and coffee. Everyone agreed, relocating to the couches and chairs, settling in with full stomachs and good moods. I served coffee and slices of pie, and once everyone had been served, I asked for their attention. The room quieted, all eyes turning toward me with mild curiosity. I saw Marcus smirk, probably expecting some pathetic speech about gratitude or forgiveness. Jennifer was smiling, pleased that her plan for a reconciliation dinner seemed to be working. Everyone else just looked politely interested, waiting to hear what I had to say. I walked over to the projector I'd set up in the corner, turned it on, and the first image appeared on the wall. A photo of my bruised face taken after one of Marcus' beatings. The purple and yellow bruises stood out starkly against my skin. My split lip visible, one eye swollen nearly shut. The room went completely silent. The kind of silence that's heavy and suffocating where you can hear people breathing and shifting uncomfortably. I let the image sit there for a long moment, letting everyone absorb it before I spoke. I want to show you all something, I said, my voice steady and calm. Nothing like the defeated apologetic tone they were used to hearing from me. I want to show you what's been happening in this house for the past year. I want you to see exactly who Marcus and Derek really are. And I want you to see what Jennifer has been allowing to happen. Then I pressed play on the first recording. Marcus's voice filled the room clear and unmistakable, telling me I was worthless, that I should kill myself, that was an embarrassment to the family. You could hear the sound of him hitting me in the background, the unmistakable thud of fist against flesh. Hear me gasping in pain, trying to say something, but getting cut off by another hit. You could hear Derek laughing, that cruel barking laugh, egging Marcus on, saying, hit him again. He needs to learn. The recording played for about 90 seconds, and in that time, the atmosphere in the room completely changed. The comfortable post-dinner contentment evaporated, replaced by shock and tension. So thick you could cut it with a knife. I watched their faces. Marcus' smirk had vanished instantly, replaced by shock that quickly morphed into rage. His face flushed red, and he started to stand up, but his father grabbed his arm, pulling him back down, hissing at him to sit still. Derek looked panicked, his eyes darting around the room like he was looking for an escape route. Jennifer had gone pale, her mouth hanging open, one hand pressed against her chest. Linda, Marcus, and Derek's mother had tears in her eyes, her face a mask of horror. Robert looked confused and then angry, but I couldn't tell yet if the anger was directed at his sons or at me for exposing them. The friends and extended family looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats, some of them starting to realize they might want to leave. I let the recording end, then calmly moved to the next piece of evidence. I pulled up more photos on the projector, going through them one by one. Bruises on my ribs, my back, my shoulders, a black eye, split knuckles from where I'd tried to defend myself. Each photo was time-stamped and dated. I provided context for each one, my voice still calm and measured. This one was from April 15th when Marcus cornered me in the garage and hit me repeatedly because I'd asked him to leave. This one was from May 3rd when Derek held me while Marcus punched me in the ribs. This one was from May 20th when they brought their friend Tony over and all three of them beat me. Marcus finally found his voice and shouted that I was lying, that this was some kind of setup. I looked at him calmly and told him to sit down and be quiet, that he'd have his chance to deny everything after I was done showing the evidence. The authority in my voice seemed to surprise him. It was so different from the defeated apologetic tone he was used to. And he actually sat back down, though he was vibrating with rage. I continued with the presentation. I showed text messages from Derek, hundreds of them, ordering me around, mocking me, threatening me. I showed financial records documenting thousands of dollars in unauthorized withdrawals and charges. I played more audio recordings, different incidents, building a comprehensive picture of systematic abuse over months. I showed text messages between Jennifer and her brothers, the ones where she laughed about my complaints, where she enabled their behavior, where she made it clear that she sided with them over her own husband. Then I played the video from the incident with Emma. This was the moment that broke the room completely. The footage showed everything. Marcus slamming me against the wall, the picture frame falling, him hitting me, and then Emma's terrified face as she screamed and ran toward us. You could hear her crying, begging Marcus to stop. See her small body physically trying to pull him away from me. You could see the moment when Marcus looked at her with anger. When he seemed on the verge of hitting her, too. You could hear her screaming, "You're bad. You're bad men." And crying hysterically. You could see her terror, her trauma, the pure fear on the face of an 8-year-old child watching her father being beaten. Linda let out a sob when she saw that. Several other people gasped or made sounds of distress. Jennifer had started crying, though I couldn't tell if it was from guilt or just shock at being exposed. Robert was staring at his sons with an expression I couldn't read. Horror mixed with something else, maybe denial starting to crack. The friends and extended family looked horrified, some of them already standing up, clearly wanting to leave this nightmare they'd stumbled into. I let the video play until it showed Marcus threatening Emma, telling her that her daddy would get it worse if she didn't go to her room. Until it showed Emma running away sobbing. Then I stopped it and turned to face the room. I said, "This is what's been happening. For over a year, Marcus and Derek have been coming into this house and abusing me. They've beaten me, threatened me, stolen from me, and terrorized my daughter. And Jennifer," I turned to look at her directly. "You've known about all of it. You've watched it happen. You've laughed along with their jokes. You've enabled every bit of it because your brother's approval is more important to you than your husband's safety or your daughter's well-being." Jennifer tried to speak, tried to say something about not knowing it was that bad, about thinking it was just family dynamics, but I cut her off. I pulled up the text messages between her and her brothers on the projector, the ones where she clearly knew what was happening and chose to enable it. I read them aloud, my voice hard. Derek texts you, "Is your husband going to be a little about us coming over tonight?" And you respond, "Probably, but don't worry, I'll handle it." Marcus texts you, "I had to straighten him out last night. He was getting mouthy." And you respond, "Thanks. He needed it." I looked at her. You knew you were part of it. Then I turned back to Marcus and Derek and delivered the final blow. "I've already shared all of this evidence with my lawyer, with the police, and with your employers. Marcus, Apex Builders launched an internal investigation into your conduct 3 weeks ago. They found evidence of workplace violence, safety violations, and intimidation that matches the behavior documented here. You're going to be fired if you haven't been already. Derek, First National Bank opened an ethics inquiry into your conduct 4 weeks ago. They've found evidence of fraudulent practices, kickbacks, and misconduct. You're also going to be fired if you haven't been already. And as of this afternoon, Criminal charges have been filed against both of you for assault and battery, multiple counts. Arrest warrants have been issued. The police are outside right now, waiting to take you into custody. Emergency restraining orders have been granted, keeping you away from me, from Emma, and from this house permanently. You're done. Both of you. Your careers are over. Your reputations are destroyed and you're going to face criminal consequences for what you've done. The room erupted. Marcus lunged toward me, his face twisted with rage, shouting obscenities, but he didn't make it 2 steps before Robert and Uncle Mike grabbed him, holding him back. Derek was on his feet, too, shouting that I'd entrapped them, that none of this would hold up in court. I just looked at him calmly and said, everything I've done is legal and documented. You entrapped yourselves. You chose to come into this house night after night. You chose to hit me. You chose to threaten me. You chose to terrorize a child. Every word, every action, every choice was yours. I just documented it. Linda was sobbing openly now, staring at her sons like she didn't recognize them. Jennifer was crying, too. But now she was angry, shouting at me, asking how I could do this, how I could destroy her family. I turned to her and said, voice cold, I didn't destroy your family. Your brothers did that when they decided to beat your husband. And you helped them when you chose to enable it instead of stopping it. You want to blame someone? Look in the mirror. There was pounding on the front door then, and I walked over and opened it. Detective Morrison stood there with 2 uniformed officers. She looked past me into the room, making eye contact with Marcus and Derek, and said clearly, Marcus Patterson. Derek Patterson. You're under arrest for assault and battery. You have the right to remain silent. Marcus tried to run. He actually tried to bolt for the back door, but the officers were ready for that. And they intercepted him before he made it out of the living room. He fought them, shouting and struggling. And they had to physically restrain him, forcing his arms behind his back and cuffing his wrists. Derek didn't fight, just stood there with his hands in the air, his face ashen as another officer cuffed him. Both men were read their rights while their parents watched in horror while friends and extended family stood frozen while Jennifer sobbed in the corner as they were being let out in handcuffs. Marcus turned to me, his face twisted with rage and spat out, you're going to regret this. You don't know what you've started. We'll destroy you. We'll take everything. I looked at him calmly and said, you already tried to destroy me for over a year. You tried to break me, to make me feel powerless and worthless, but I'm not your victim anymore, and I'm not my brother anymore either. His face went blank with confusion at that last statement, but before he could process it, the officers pulled him toward the door. They were loaded into police cars and driven away, and suddenly the house was much quieter. Just the soft sound of Linda crying and Jennifer's ragged breathing and people shifting uncomfortably. I turned to the remaining guests and said, I think it's time for everyone to leave. If anyone wants copies of the evidence for your own understanding of what's been happening, I can provide that. Otherwise, please go. Most people couldn't leave fast enough. The friends and extended family practically fled, offering awkward condolences or apologies or just leaving in shocked silence. Linda approached me before she left, tears streaming down her face and said, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't know they were doing this. I looked at her, saw genuine horror and regret in her eyes, and some of my anger softened slightly. I said, maybe you didn't know the extent of it, but there were signs. There were moments when you could have asked questions, could have paid attention, could have wondered why your son-in-law looked increasingly afraid and beaten down. Those signs were there. Everyone chose not to see them. She nodded, crying harder, and left with Robert, who still hadn't said a word. It was just me and Jennifer in the living room. She sat on the couch, her face blotchy from crying, and she looked up at me with something like hatred. How could you? She asked, her voice. How could you do this to my family? To me? We're going to lose everything because of you. I sat down across from her, suddenly exhausted, the adrenaline that had been keeping me going starting to fade. I said, Jennifer, your brothers have been beating your husband for over a year. They terrorized your daughter. They stole money. They turned your home into a place of fear and violence. And you let them. You enabled them. You chose their approval over your family's safety. This didn't happen because of me. This happened because of choices you and your brothers made over and over again. She shook her head, still in denial, and said, but they were just being brothers. They were protecting me, making sure you were treating me right. I let out a bitter laugh. Protecting you from what? From a husband who loved you and wanted to build a life with you. They weren't protecting you, Jennifer. They were controlling you and they were abusing him. And you let them because it was easier than standing up to them, easier than choosing your husband over your brothers. I stood up then and told her that divorce papers would be filed within the week, that my brother, the real one, because I wasn't going to hide that anymore, would be seeking sole custody of Emma, and that she should get a lawyer. She looked at me in confusion, starting to ask what I meant by the real one. And that's when I decided to tell her the truth. I said, "I'm not your husband. I'm his twin brother. He came to me 7 weeks ago, covered in bruises, terrified, broken. He asked me to switch places with him so he could get away and heal. So I stepped into his life, took his place, and I've been living here, taking the abuse he was taking, documenting everything, building a case to destroy the men who were destroying him. Your husband is safe. Away from you and your brothers, and he's been healing. And I've been gathering evidence to make sure that Marcus and Derek and you face consequences for what you've done. Everything you've been doing to him for the past 7 weeks, you've been doing to me. Every hit, every insult, every moment of cruelty, I took it for him and I documented all of it." Her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally understanding. She whispered, "You're not his brother this whole time." I nodded. She said, "But you were everything was I finished for her. Everything was exactly like him because I studied how he moved, how he talked, how he'd been broken down by you and your brothers. I became him so thoroughly that you never questioned it. That's how broken he was, Jennifer. I could step into his life and play the part of a beaten down, terrified man, and you didn't notice anything different because that's what he'd become." She stared at me for a long moment and I saw something break behind her eyes. Some final piece of denial shattering. Then she just put her face in her hands and sobbed. I felt no sympathy. I stood up, told her I'd be staying in the house tonight, but she should probably go to her parents' place. And I went upstairs to the guest room I'd been using. Behind me, I heard her crying, but I closed the door and shut it out. It was done. I'd exposed them. I'd set the trap, and they'd walked right into it. Everything else would unfold from here: the legal proceedings, the consequences, the rebuilding. But the hardest part, the dangerous part where I'd had to take abuse and endure and play a role, that was over. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my phone. I called my brother at the cabin. He answered on the first ring, his voice tight with anxiety, and asked how it had gone. I told him everything about the dinner, about the evidence, about the reactions, about Marcus and Derek being arrested, about Jennifer's complicity being exposed, about how it was finally over. He was silent for a long moment, and then I heard him crying. Great gasping so of relief and release. He said, "Thank you. Thank you. I don't know how to ever thank you enough." I told him he didn't need to thank me, that he was my brother and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. I told him to stay at the cabin for a few more days while things settled, and then he could come home to his new apartment, the one I'd helped him find and set up far away from this house and Jennifer and her family. He said he would. And we talked for a while longer, processing everything. Both of us exhausted and relieved and still struggling to believe it was really over. After I hung up, I just sat there in the quiet room, feeling the bruises ache, feeling the exhaustion settle into my bones. And I let myself breathe. It was done. The nightmare was over. And tomorrow, the real work of healing and justice and rebuilding would begin. But tonight, I just let myself feel the relief of having survived, having succeeded, having protected my brother and niece from the men who tried to destroy them.
And that concludes this story. That was a pretty wild one if you ask me. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. Now, let's get right into the next story. It's titled,
My wife said, "If you don't trust me working late night with my boss every day, maybe we shouldn't be together." I replied, "You are absolutely right." Then I accepted the job transfer to New York. I'd been declining for her. When she texted, "What are you doing this weekend?" I sent a selfie from John F. Kennedy International Airport. For years. That's how long I'd been married to Julia. And let me tell you, I thought we had our together. Sure, we weren't some fairy tale couple posting Instagram stories every 5 minutes about our perfect love, but we were solid. Or at least that's what I kept telling myself while watching my wife transform into someone I barely recognized. It all started innocently enough. Or so I thought, because apparently I'm about as sharp as a bowling ball when it comes to reading the obvious signs. Julia landed this new position at her marketing firm, working directly under Adrian, this hotshot executive who looked like he stepped out of a Men's Health magazine cover. The guy had that whole "I definitely use product in my hair and own more than 3 suits" vibe going on. But hey, good for her, right? Career advancement and all that American dream. The first few late nights seemed legit. Big presentation coming up, client demands. The usual corporate circus that keeps the lights on and the mortgage paid. Julia would come home around 9, maybe 10 o'clock, looking tired, but talking animatedly about strategy sessions and brainstorming marathons with Adrian. I'd heat up her dinner, pour her a glass of wine, and listen to her decompress. Supportive husband material right there. I should have gotten a damn medal. But then 9 became 10, 10 became 11. 11 became, don't wait up, honey. We're really in the zone here. And suddenly, every single project at her company apparently required round-the-clock attention from my wife and her dreamy boss. What were they doing over there? Solving world hunger? Curing cancer? Nope. Just selling overpriced skincare products to suburban moms. But apparently that required more dedication than NASA's moon landing. The changes were subtle at first, which is probably why it took my dense ass so long to connect the dots. Julia started paying attention to her appearance in ways she hadn't since we were dating. New dresses that never saw the inside of our apartment, let alone a dinner date with me. Perfume that smelled expensive and definitely wasn't the stuff I bought her last Christmas. Hair appointments every 2 weeks like clockwork. She looked amazing, don't get me wrong, but it stung like hell knowing none of that effort was for the guy sharing her bed. The worst part, those late-night Uber rides home. I'd hear her phone buzz with notifications, see Adrian's name pop up with messages like "cars here" or "thanks for staying late again." Real professional stuff, clearly nothing suspicious about your married employee's boss personally arranging her transportation at midnight, right? I mean, what kind of paranoid psycho would read anything into that? My friends started giving me those looks, you know, the once part pity, part dude. Seriously, Clara, Julia's co-worker and supposedly one of her closest friends, would get this uncomfortable expression whenever I'd casually ask if the whole team was pulling these marathon hours. Oh. Well, you know how it is with big projects. She'd stammer, avoiding eye contact like I'd asked her to solve calculus. Real convincing, Clara. Your poker face needs work. Even my brother Daniel, who usually minded his own business and stuck to safe topics like sports and complaining about his ex-wife's alimony payments, felt compelled to stage an intervention. We were grabbing beers after work one Thursday and he just laid it out there with all the subtlety of a freight train. "Marcus, you're blind if you don't see what's happening." What's that supposed to mean? I asked, though my stomach was already dropping like a stone. Come on, man. Julie is working late every night with Prince Charming. Coming home looking like she stepped off a runway and you're sitting here acting like this is normal. Wake up. But I didn't want to wake up. I wanted to be the cool, trusting husband who didn't turn into some paranoid stalker checking phone records and demanding receipts. I wanted to believe that my wife of 4 years wouldn't throw away everything we'd built for some office romance novel fantasy. I wanted to trust that the woman who promised to love and honor meant those words. So, I played the part. I smiled when she kissed me goodbye before another emergency strategy session. Nodded understandingly when she explained how Adrienne really valued her input on the Johnson account, pretended not to notice when she started keeping her phone face down during dinner, or how she'd suddenly developed an urgent need to shower the moment she walked through the door. The excuses kept piling up like dirty laundry. Client emergencies that only she could handle. Presentations that required her specific expertise until well past normal human bedtime. Team building exercises that apparently happened at 11 p.m. on weeknights. It was like watching someone construct an elaborate house of cards. Each lie balanced precariously on the last, waiting for the inevitable collapse. Meanwhile, I'm the chump, heating up leftovers alone, watching Netflix by myself, going to bed in an empty house because my wife is apparently the only person in the tri-state area capable of handling whatever crisis Adrian's company was perpetually facing. The loneliness was eating me alive, but I kept telling myself this was temporary, just a busy season. Things would go back to normal once this project wrapped up. Except there was always another project, another deadline. Another reason why Adrienne absolutely needed Julia's undivided attention at hours when most people were home with their families, walking their dogs, or doing literally anything that didn't involve cozying up with their boss in an empty office building. I should have trusted my gut. Should have listened to Daniel, to Clara's awkward stammering, to every red flag waving in my face like a matador's cape. But love makes you stupid and hope makes you stubborn. I kept believing because the alternative, accepting that my marriage was a joke and my wife was playing house with another man, was too painful to process. For years of marriage. And this is what it came down to. Me alone in our apartment, wondering if the woman I'd promised my life to was ever coming home. While my wife was busy playing corporate Cinderella with Prince Adrian, I was getting my own fairy tale offer. Except this one actually involved real money and didn't require me to pretend I was blind. Harold Peterson, my boss for the past 3 years and a straight shooter who looked like he'd stepped out of a 1950s business manual, had been dangling this New York opportunity in front of me like a carrot on a stick. The first time he brought it up was during one of our quarterly reviews, right around the time Julia's late nights were becoming a regular Tuesday through Thursday affair. Harold leaned back in his leather chair, the kind that probably cost more than my car payment, and dropped the bomb with characteristic bluntness. Marcus, I'm going to cut to the chase here. Corporate wants you in Manhattan. Regional director position, overseeing the entire East Coast operation. We're talking a 70% salary bump, company apartment overlooking Central Park, full relocation package, and enough responsibility to make your head spin in the best possible way. I nearly choked on my coffee. 70%. That wasn't just a raise. That was life-changing money. The kind of cash that could pay off our student loans, maybe even let us think about buying instead of renting. But before I could even process the numbers, my brain went straight to Julia mode. That's incredible, Harold. But my wife's got her career here. Her family's all local, and she's really building something with her current company. The words came out automatically, like some kind of programmed response. Good husband Marcus always putting his wife's needs first, even when she was probably planning her next late-night strategy session with Mr. Perfect Hair. Harold gave me this look, part disappointment, part "are you kidding me right now?" He'd been in corporate long enough to recognize when someone was making excuses and he wasn't buying my supportive spouse routine. Marcus, let me be clear about something. Opportunities like this don't grow on trees. Hell, they don't even grow in greenhouses with perfect conditions and daily fertilizing. This is the kind of position people spend decades working toward, and they're offering it to you at 32. You sure you want to pass this up for someone else's comfort zone? But I did pass it up like an absolute champion of self-sabotage. I smiled, shook his hand, and told him I was flattered, but couldn't make that kind of move right now. Harold looked like I just told him I preferred route canals to promotions, but he nodded and said he'd keep the position open for a few weeks just in case I came to my senses. That night, I went home to an empty apartment. Shocking, I know, and tried to imagine telling Julia about the offer. In my fantasy version, she'd be excited, maybe even proud that her husband was being headhunted for such a prestigious role. We'd spend the evening talking about our future, about the adventures we could have in the city, about how this could be the fresh start we didn't even know we needed. Reality, of course, had other plans. Julia strolled in at 11:47 p.m. looking like she'd been styled by a team of professionals, smelling like expensive perfume and somebody else's cologne. When I mentioned the New York opportunity carefully, like I was defusing a bomb, she barely looked up from her phone. That's nice, honey, but you know, I can't just abandon everything I've built here. My career is finally taking off. And Adrienne says, I have real potential for advancement. Plus, Mom would literally have a heart attack if we moved that far away. Adrienne says, those two words were starting to make my eye twitch. When did my wife's boss become the oracle of career wisdom? When did his opinions start matching more than her husband's once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? A month later, Harold approached me again. This time he wasn't taking no for an answer quite so gracefully. Marcus, I'm going to be straight with you because I like you and I'd hate to see you make a mistake you'll regret for the rest of your life. The company is restructuring this New York position. It's not just a promotion anymore. It's a lifeboat. The regional offices are consolidating, which means your current role might not exist in 6 months. You can either take the golden parachute to Manhattan or you can update your resume and hope someone else appreciates your talents as much as we do. The subtext was crystal clear. Take the job or start job hunting in a market that was about as friendly as a pack of hungry wolves. But even with that gun to my head, my first instinct was still to consider Julia's feelings. How could I uproot her life? How could I ask her to leave her blossoming career with Adrienne, her marketing firm, just because my job was disappearing? I asked for another week to think it over. Harold agreed, but I could see the frustration in his eyes. He was offering me a chance to run with the big dogs, and I was acting like he'd asked me to relocate to Mars. That week was hell. Every night, Julia came home later and more distracted. Every morning, she left earlier and more dressed up. I felt like I was living with a beautiful stranger who occasionally shared my bed and split the utility bills. Meanwhile, Harold's offer sat on my mental desk like a blinking neon sign. Escape route available. Terms and conditions apply. I started doing the math. The salary bump would mean financial security I'd never experienced. The apartment in Manhattan was worth more in monthly rent than I currently made in 3 months. The career trajectory was the kind of thing that opens doors for decades. But every time I got excited about the possibilities, I'd picture Julia's face when I told her we were leaving. I'd imagine the fight, the tears, the accusations that I was being selfish and impulsive, so I turned it down a second time. Harold didn't even try to hide his disappointment. Marcus, I've been doing this for 25 years, and I've never seen someone work so hard to sabotage their own success. Whatever's holding you back here, I hope it's worth sacrificing your future for, because that's exactly what you're doing. His words stuck with me like a bad song you can't get out of your head. Every time Julia texted that she'd be late again. Every time she came home smelling like someone else's life, I heard Harold's voice asking if it was worth it. Every time I ate dinner alone or went to bed in an empty house, I wondered if I was the biggest fool in the tri-state area. The third time Harold approached me, I could see he was done playing games. This was his final offer, and we both knew it. The question was whether I'd finally choose myself or keep waiting for approval that was never going to come. Friday evening, the end of another week of watching my marriage dissolve in real time while I sat on the sidelines like some kind of emotional benchwarmer. Julia was in our bedroom preparing for what had become her weekly ritual. Getting dolled up for another urgent project with Adrian. The sound of her hairdryer mixed with the notification pings from her phone created this perfect soundtrack of betrayal that I'd become way too familiar with. I was sitting on the couch staring at my laptop screen where Harold's latest email sat open like a digital ultimatum. Final offer expires Monday morning. Need your decision by then. 3 months of turning down the opportunity of a lifetime because I was trying to be the supportive husband to a woman who couldn't even be bothered to lie convincingly anymore. The hairdryer shut off and I could hear Julia moving around the bedroom with that focused energy she used to reserve for special occasions with me. Date nights, anniversaries, my birthday, back when those things mattered to her more than whatever the hell she was doing with Prince Adrian. Every night after normal humans went home to their families. She emerged from the bedroom looking like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. Black dress that hugged her curves in all the right places. A dress I'd never seen before naturally. Hairstyled in those loose waves that took her an hour to perfect makeup that could have been done by a professional. And that perfume, the expensive stuff that definitely wasn't in our bathroom cabinet. You look nice, I said, testing the waters. Hot date with Adrian again. She didn't even flinch. Just checked her reflection in the hallway mirror and adjusted her earrings like I'd asked about the weather. It's not a date, Marcus. It's work. Some of us take our careers seriously. That little dig hit exactly where she intended it to. Some of us take our careers seriously, like I was some slacker who'd been coasting through life while she climbed the corporate ladder one late night meeting at a time. Actually, speaking of careers, I said, closing my laptop and standing up. I was thinking maybe we could grab dinner tonight. There's that new Italian place on 5th Street you mentioned wanting to try. We could talk about some changes coming up at my job. Julia's phone buzzed. Adrian's name lit up the screen with a text that probably said something earth-shattering like, "Car, or ready when you are." She glanced at it, then at me, and I watched her face cycle through emotions like she was running diagnostics. Marcus, Adrienne needs me tonight. This Johnson account presentation is Monday, and if we don't nail this, it could cost the company the contract. I can't just abandon my responsibilities because you suddenly want to play house. Play house? That's what she called me, wanting to have dinner with my own wife. My marriage had officially become a game of house, and apparently I was the only one still playing. Julia, you've been working late every single night for 3 months, weekends, too. When exactly are we supposed to spend time together? When am I supposed to matter in this marriage? She rolled her eyes. Actually rolled her eyes like I was being some kind of needy child asking for attention during grown-up time. Marcus, this is what success looks like. If you don't trust me to work late with my boss, if you can't handle me having a demanding career, then maybe we shouldn't be together. There it was. The nuclear option delivered with all the casualness of someone ordering coffee. Maybe we shouldn't be together. She said it like it was my fault, like my inability to trust her midnight office marathons with Mr. Perfect Hair was the problem in our relationship. I felt something shift inside me, like a switch being flipped or a door being slammed shut. For months, I've been twisting myself into knots, trying to be understanding, trying to support her career growth, trying to ignore every red flag waving in my face like a matador's cape. I'd been so busy being the perfect trusting husband that I'd forgotten I had other options. You know what, Julia? I said, my voice surprisingly calm. You're absolutely right, she blinked, clearly expecting me to backpedal into apologies and reassurances. The smile that started spreading across her face was pure satisfaction. She thought she'd won. Thought she'd successfully guilt-tripped me back into my role as the compliant husband who didn't ask uncomfortable questions. We shouldn't be together, I continued watching that smile freeze like a glitch in a video game. Her phone buzzed again. Adrian, no doubt, wondering where his favorite employee was. But for once, Julia wasn't reaching for it immediately. She was staring at me like I just started speaking Mandarin. What did you just say? I said, you're right. If I can't trust my wife working until midnight every night with her boss. If I'm such a burden to your career success, then we definitely shouldn't be together. I pulled out my phone, found Harold's email, and hit reply. My fingers moved across the keyboard with more certainty than I'd felt in months. Harold, I'll take the New York position. Can start in 2 weeks. Thanks for your patience. The send notification sounded like a gunshot in the silence of our apartment. Julia's face went through several expressions at once. Confusion, disbelief, anger, and something that might have been panic. Marcus, what are you doing? I'm taking a job in New York. Regional Director, 70% salary increase, company apartment in Manhattan. Remember the opportunity one turned down twice because I thought my wife's happiness was more important than my career. Her phone buzzed a third time. This time, she didn't even glance at it. You can't be serious. You're going to throw away 4 years of marriage because you're having some kind of jealous breakdown. I'm not throwing anything away, Julia. You already did that. I'm just finally accepting reality instead of pretending that my marriage isn't a joke and my wife isn't screwing her boss. I am not. Save it. We both know what's happening here. The only difference is that I'm finally done pretending I don't know. Her phone rang. Adrian's ringtone. She'd given him his own special sound because of course she had. She stared at it like it might explode, then looked back at me with something approaching desperation. Marcus, you're being ridiculous. You can't just I can and I am. Have fun at your meeting tonight. Try not to work too hard. I walked into the bedroom, pulled out my suitcase, and started packing. Behind me, I could hear Julia's phone ringing again. Could hear her frantic whispered conversation with Adrian. Could hear the reality of her choices finally crashing down around her. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The sound of my suitcase zipper cutting through the silence was like a period at the end of a very long, very painful sentence. 4 years of marriage, and it all came down to this. Me folding clothes while my wife had a panicked phone conversation with her boss/side piece in the living room. Adrian, I can't come tonight. Marcus says he's lost his mind. He's packing. He says he's moving to New York. Her voice carried that edge of hysteria that people get when their carefully constructed house of lies starts collapsing in real time. I kept folding shirts, pants, the good suit I'd bought for our anniversary dinner last year, the one where Julia spent half the evening checking her phone for urgent work messages. Everything fit surprisingly well into 2 suitcases, which probably said something depressing about how little I'd accumulated during our marriage, or maybe how ready I was to leave it all behind. Julia's conversation with Adrian continued in hushed, frantic tones. I caught bits and pieces. No, you can't come over here. He knows, Adrian. I think he knows. This is a disaster. Yeah, it was a disaster. All right, just not for the reasons she thought. I moved to the bathroom, grabbing my toothbrush, shampoo, the electric razor she bought me for Christmas because apparently my face wasn't meeting her standards anymore. Funny how all these little details suddenly made sense when viewed through the lens of my wife is cheating on me with her boss. By the time I emerged from the bathroom, Julia had hung up and was standing in the bedroom doorway looking like someone had just told her Santa Claus was a lie and the Easter Bunny had gambling debts. Marcus, stop. Just stop for a minute and think about what you're doing. I am thinking for the first time in months, actually. Turns out my brain works a lot better when I'm not trying to convince myself that my marriage isn't a complete sham. She stepped into the room, her perfect hair slightly mussed from running her hands through it. Her makeup starting to smudge around the edges. The transformation from magazine cover gorgeous to desperate housewife was almost impressive in its speed. You can't just throw away 4 years like this. Over what? Some paranoid delusion that I'm cheating on you. Paranoid delusion? I laughed and it came out harsher than I intended. Julia, you've been working until midnight every single night for 3 months. You dress like you're going to Fashion Week just to sit in conference rooms. You smell like men's cologne when you come home. And your boss personally arranges your late night transportation. If this is a delusion, it's the most logical one in history. Adrian is my mentor. He's helping me advance my career. God, Marcus, why can't you just trust me? Trust. She wanted me to trust her while she was doing everything short of sending me a PowerPoint presentation titled, How I'm Cheating on My Husband for Dummies, because trust goes both ways, Julia, and you haven't given me a single reason to trust you in months. Hell, you haven't even tried to be subtle about it. I zipped up the second suitcase and set it next to the first one. 2 bags for years of marriage reduced to 2 pieces of luggage and a growing sense of relief that scared me with its intensity. Where are you even going to stay tonight? Hotel. Harold's arranging temporary housing until the company apartment is ready. Harold knew about this. Harold's been trying to save my career while you've been destroying my marriage. Yeah, he knew. Julia's phone buzzed again. Adrian, no doubt. Wondering if the coast was clear for their regularly scheduled programming. She glanced at it, then back at me, and I watched the exact moment she realized she had to choose between dealing with her imploding marriage and keeping her boss happy. She chose her boss. Of course, she did. I have too. Adrian's waiting, and this presentation really is important. Sure it is. Don't let me keep you from your very important work. She grabbed her purse, checked her reflection in the mirror one more time, and headed for the door. But she stopped at the threshold, turning back with what I assumed was supposed to be her final guilt trip. Marcus, I'll cut back on the late nights. If it bothers you so much, we can work this out. You don't have to run away to New York. Run away like I was some scared kid fleeing the scene instead of a grown man making a strategic career move while escaping a toxic marriage. Julia, the only thing that bothers me is that you think I'm stupid enough to believe your lies. Have fun with Adrian tonight. Try to keep it professional. She left, actually walked out the door to go spend the evening with her boss while her husband packed up his life and prepared to move across the country. The symbolism was so perfect it almost hurt. I called a locksmith 24-hour service because apparently there's a market for people who need to change their locks on a Friday night. Guy showed up an hour later, took one look at my suitcases and the general vibe of domestic apocalypse, and got to work without asking questions. Probably wasn't his first marriage-ending lock change. While he worked, I packed up Julia's stuff. Not out of spite. Well, not entirely out of spite, but because the lease was in my name, and I wasn't interested in being her storage facility while she figured out her next move. Her clothes, her books, her collection of overpriced skincare products that apparently weren't working their magic on her conscience. Everything fit into boxes surprisingly easily for years of shared life. And her stuff barely filled 6 cardboard containers. Made me wonder if she'd been mentally checked out of this marriage longer than I realized. My phone started buzzing around 11 p.m. text after text from Julia. Each one more desperate than the last. Marcus, this is insane. You can't just change the locks. I'm your wife. You can't kick me out of my own home. You're having a breakdown. You need help. I'll quit my job if that's what you want. Adrian means nothing to me. It's just work. Please don't throw away our marriage over a misunderstanding. You're scaring me. This isn't like you. That last one made me laugh. This isn't like you. She was right. The old Marcus would have been a doormat. Would have apologized for being suspicious. Would have convinced himself that midnight strategy sessions with dreamy bosses were totally normal in the modern workplace. But the old Marcus was an idiot who nearly flushed his career down the toilet for a woman who couldn't even be bothered to lie convincingly about her affair. The new Marcus was done being an idiot. Saturday morning hit me like a freight train made of regret and Red Bull. I'd spent the night at a holiday Inn that smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and broken dreams, surrounded by my hastily packed belongings and a growing pile of increasingly unhinged text messages from Julia. By 3 a.m., she'd progressed from denial to bargaining to what I could only describe as creative fiction about her relationship with Adrian. I was sitting in the hotel's lobby, nursing what had to be the world's most depressing continental breakfast coffee, when my phone rang. Noah's name popped up on the screen, and I almost didn't answer. Noah was one of those friends who somehow always knew when your life was imploding. Usually because he had connections everywhere and a talent for being in the right place at the right time to witness maximum drama. Marcus, dude, please tell me you're sitting down for this. I'm eating stale bagels in a hotel lobby at 8 o'clock in the morning. Trust me, I'm prepared for bad news. Okay, so you know my cousin Jake works at Julia's firm, right? He's in accounting, keeps to himself, but he goes to the same gym as some of the marketing guys. I felt my stomach drop somewhere around my shoes. Noah, if you're about to tell me something I don't want to hear, you need to hear this, man. Jake was at the gym yesterday doing his usual treadmill thing when he overhears Adrian bragging to some other douchebag about his late-night partner. And get this, he's not even trying to be subtle about it. He's talking about hotel receipts, talking about how gullible some husbands are talking about. Stop. I set down my coffee cup before I threw it across the lobby. Just stop for a second. But Noah was on a roll and apparently he'd been saving this information like ammunition for exactly this moment. Marcus, there's more. Jake started paying attention after that. And these guys have been talking about you specifically. Adrian's been calling you the clueless husband in group chats. There are screenshots, man. Screenshots of him mocking you for being too trusting. The hotel lobby started spinning slightly. All those nights I'd convinced myself I was being paranoid, that I was the problem, that I needed to trust my wife more. Turns out I was the punchline of some corporate joke. The faithful husband who heated up dinner while his wife was getting her back blown out by her boss. Send them to me, Marcus. Send me the screenshots, Noah. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up with a series of images that felt like getting punched in the soul. Group chat messages between Adrian and what looked like half the marketing department, complete with laughing, crying emojis and commentary that made my skin crawl. Another late night with a married one face with tears of joy. Does her husband actually believe the overtime story? Guys, either the most trusting man alive or the dumbest. Either way, works for me, man. Shrugging. Hotel receipts are tax deductible if it's for client meetings, right? Winking face. Poor bastard probably thinks she's employee of the month material. There were dozens of messages spanning weeks. Detailed jokes about my marriage. Speculation about how long it would take me to figure it out. Even a betting pool on whether I'd ever grow a spine and leave her. Adrienne had turned my personal life into office entertainment. And apparently, everyone was having a blast watching the show. The worst part, Julia wasn't just a passive participant in this humiliation. There were screenshots of her messages, too, complaining about having to keep up appearances at home, joking about how I was getting suspicious, but was too nice to actually do anything about it. Marcus is asking questions about why I'm working so late. Might need to dial it back for a week or two. He wanted to go to dinner tonight, face with rolling eyes. Had to pretend I cared about his day for 20 minutes before I could leave. Adrienne says, the Johnson account excuse is getting old. Need new material for why I can't be home before midnight. My wife, the woman I'd been married to for 4 years, the woman I'd turned down life-changing career opportunities for, had been treating our marriage like an inconvenient obstacle to her extracurricular activities. I wasn't even a person to her anymore. I was just Marcus, the annoying husband who asked too many questions and wanted too much attention. I forwarded all the screenshots to Julia with a single word, interesting. Then I turned off my phone and sat in that lobby for 2 hours watching families check out with their luggage and their weekend plans, wondering how the hell I'd become such a joke for years of marriage. And I'd been living in a sitcom where I was the bumbling husband who didn't know his wife was screwing around. Except it wasn't funny and I was the only one who didn't know the punchline. When I finally turned my phone back on, I had 17 missed calls from Julia and about 30 text messages that started apologetic and rapidly devolved into full-scale panic. Where did you get those messages? You're taking them out of context. Adrienne was just joking around. You know how guys talk. Those messages don't mean anything. You can't trust Jake. He's always been jealous of Adrienne. This is invasion of privacy. You had no right to get those screenshots. I never said anything bad about you. Those messages are fake. Marcus, call me back. I'm coming to the hotel. Which hotel are you at? You can't just ignore me. I'm your wife. Adrienne is nothing to me. It was just a mistake. Please don't leave me over some stupid office gossip. I love you. Doesn't that mean anything? Fine. Ignore me. But you're destroying our marriage over lies. I can't believe you're choosing strangers over your own wife. You're having a mental breakdown and you need help. This is emotional abuse. You're punishing me for having a career. The progression from panic to anger to desperation to blame was almost impressive. She'd managed to hit every stage of getting caught in a lie, complete with gaslighting and victim blaming. Classic cheater's playbook executed with the precision of someone who'd probably been practicing these responses in case this day ever came. I deleted all the messages without responding. Let her panic. Let her wonder. Let her experience even a fraction of the uncertainty and confusion she'd been putting me through for months. My phone rang again. Julia's ringtone, the one I thought was cute when we were dating, now sounded like nails on a chalkboard. I sent it straight to voicemail and started packing my stuff. I had a flight to New York tomorrow and I wasn't about to miss it for any more of Julia's creative explanations about why betraying your spouse was actually a sign of career ambition. Some bridges deserve to be burned. Sunday morning, the day of my flight to New York, I was finishing up my last-minute packing when the sound of aggressive door pounding shattered the peaceful silence of my hotel room. Not knocking, pounding. The kind of rhythmic hammering that suggested someone was either having a medical emergency or was about to star in their own episode of When Wives Attack. I already knew who it was before I opened the door. What I didn't expect was the full delegation. Julia stood front and center looking like she hadn't slept in 3 days, flanked by her mother, Linda, a woman who'd never met a boundary she couldn't cross, and her sister Brooke, who had apparently been recruited as backup moral support for this little intervention. Marcus Anthony Coleman. Linda announced using my full name like I was 10 years old and had been caught stealing cookies. We need to talk right now. They pushed past me into the hotel room without waiting for an invitation, which was pretty much standard operating procedure for Linda. The woman had all the subtlety of a bulldozer wearing lipstick and had never encountered a family crisis she couldn't make worse by getting involved. Nice to see you, too, Linda. Brooke. I closed the door and turned to face what was clearly going to be an ambush disguised as a concerned family meeting. Julia looked terrible, which gave me a weird sense of satisfaction I probably shouldn't admit to. Her hair was unwashed, her makeup was smudged, And she was wearing the same clothes from Friday night, which meant she'd probably been camped out at her mother's place having a 36-hour meltdown about how her perfect little side piece situation had exploded in her face. Marcus Brooks started using her therapist voice. She was getting her master's in psychology, which apparently made her the family expert on everyone else's mental health. Julia told us you're having some kind of breakdown. Quitting your life and running away to New York isn't a normal response to marital stress. Marital stress? I almost laughed. Is that what we're calling it? Linda jumped in before I could elaborate. Young man, Julia explained everything. She's been working hard to advance her career. And instead of supporting her like a good husband should, you've been spying on her and making wild accusations. Now you're abandoning your marriage over some paranoid fantasy. Paranoid fantasy. I pulled out my phone, found the screenshots Noah had sent me, and held it up. Would you like to see the group chat where Julia's boss calls me the clueless husband while bragging about hotel receipts with my wife? The room went dead silent. Linda's mouth actually dropped open, which was the first time in 20 years I'd seen her speechless. Brooke looked like someone had just explained that everything she thought she knew about physics was wrong. Julia, meanwhile, went through about 15 different facial expressions in the span of 3 seconds before settling on righteous indignation. Those messages are taken out of context. Adrian was just what, Julia? Just joking around about screwing another man's wife? Just having a laugh about how gullible I am while you two were playing house on company time. I scrolled through the screenshots, reading aloud some of the choicest quotes. Linda's face got paler with each message, and Brooke kept glancing between me and Julia like she was watching a tennis match where someone was about to get beheaded. Poor bastard probably thinks she's employee of the month material. I read, guys, either the most trusting man alive or the dumbest. Either way, works for me. Real professional relationship you've got there, Julia. Marcus, stop. Brooke said quietly. This is what, Brooke? Hard to hear. Uncomfortable. Yeah. Imagine how I felt living it while everyone I knew was giving me pity looks and trying to figure out how to tell me my marriage was a joke. Linda had finally found her voice again. Julia Marie, what in the hell is this? She was using her daughter's full name now, which meant someone was about to get the lecture of their life. Julia's defense strategy was predictable. Deflect, minimize, blame everyone else. Mom, those messages don't mean what Marcus thinks they mean. Adrienne has a twisted sense of humor, and the guys at work are immature. I never did anything wrong. Never did anything wrong. I pulled up another screenshot. Here's one where you complain about having to keep up appearances at home. Here's another where you joke about me being too nice to actually leave you. What exactly do you call that, Julia? I was venting. Everyone vents about their marriage sometimes to their boss. The same boss you've been spending every evening with for 3 months. The same boss who's apparently been collecting hotel receipts for your client meetings. Brooke was shaking her head like she couldn't process what she was hearing. Julia, please tell me you didn't actually. I didn't do anything. Julia exploded. God, you're all acting like I committed murder. So what if Adrian and I got close? So, what if we spent time together outside of work? That doesn't mean anything happened. Nothing happened. I scrolled to another screenshot. Here's Adrian talking about how the married one gives the best presentations after midnight. Here's him making jokes about soundproofing hotel rooms. What kind of client meetings requires soundproofing, Julia? The silence that followed was deafening. Linda looked like someone had told her that her retirement fund had been invested in Monopoly money. Brooke was staring at her sister with the expression of someone who just discovered their childhood hero was actually a serial killer. Juliet tried one last desperate play. This is emotional abuse. You're ganging up on me, humiliating me with private messages that were stolen from my workplace. I could probably sue Jake for this. Sue Jake? I laughed and it came out bitter as black coffee. Julia, the only person who humiliated you is you. These aren't private love letters that got hacked. These are your boss and coworkers making fun of your marriage in a group chat. You turned our relationship into office entertainment. Linda finally spoke, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. Julia, honey, is this true? Have you been with this man? Mom, it's complicated. You don't understand the pressure I'm under at work. The expectations. It's a yes or no question. I interrupted. Did you or didn't you sleep with Adrian? Julia's face crumpled. Not in a sad way, in a defeated way. The way people look when they realize their elaborate house of cards has finally collapsed. And there's no point in pretending the pile of cardboard was ever a real building. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, she whispered. And there it was. Not an admission exactly, but close enough. Linda sat down heavily on the hotel room's single chair. Brooke covered her face with her hands, and Julia started crying. Real tears this time, not the manipulative ones she'd been using for 3 days. "I have a flight to catch," I said, zipping up my carry-on bag. "My new life starts in about 4 hours, and I'm not missing it for any more of this drama." I handed Brooke the screenshots. "Here, show these to whoever needs to see them. I'm done being the bad guy in my own marriage." As I walked toward the door, Linda called out one last time, "Marcus, what do you want us to tell people?" "Tell them the truth, Linda. For once in this whole mess, just tell the truth." Landing at JFK felt like stepping through a portal into a parallel universe where I wasn't the punchline of my own life story. The moment I walked off that plane, breathing in air that didn't smell like broken dreams and other people's cologne, I knew I'd made the right choice. Hell, I should have made this choice months ago. But better late than never, right? The company car was waiting. An actual black sedan with my name on a placard. Like I was some kind of executive instead of a guy who'd spent the last 72 hours discovering that his marriage was basically a reality TV show where everyone knew the plot twist except him. The driver, a cheerful Puerto Rican guy named Miguel, spent the ride into Manhattan giving me the unofficial tour. First time in the city, first time living here I visited, but this is different. Yeah, man. It's always different when you're staying. You're running towards something or away from something. I laughed, surprised by his directness. Little bit of both, I guess. Best kind of move. Fresh starts are good for the soul, you know. Miguel was right. As we crawled through the Lincoln Tunnel and emerged into the chaos of Midtown, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Excitement about my future. Not anxiety, not dread, not that sinking feeling of watching my life spiral down the drain while I stood there with a plunger. Actual honest-to-God excitement. The apartment was on the Upper West Side, 15 floors up with a view of Central Park that made my old place look like a closet with delusions of grandeur. Floor-to-ceiling windows, modern kitchen, enough space to actually think without bumping into reminders of my failed marriage. It was furnished with that corporate housing aesthetic, clean, professional, and completely devoid of personality, which was exactly what I needed. I stood at those windows for 20 minutes, watching joggers and dog walkers navigate the park paths below, and realized this was the first time in months I'd looked at something without wondering what Julia was doing, where she was, or who she was with. The constant background anxiety that had become my normal had just evaporated. My phone buzzed with yet another text from Julia. She was up to about 50 unread messages at this point, but I didn't even glance at it. Whatever crisis she was manufacturing back home was no longer my problem to solve. Monday morning came with a wake-up call I'd almost forgotten existed. Genuine enthusiasm for work. I'd been going through the motions at my old job for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to actually give a damn about what I was doing. Harold had set up meetings with the entire regional team, and walking into that conference room felt like stepping into the major leagues. The team was sharp, motivated, and refreshingly drama-y. No one was sleeping with anyone else's spouse. No one was using group chats to mock their colleagues' personal lives, and everybody seemed to understand that working late meant actually working, not using the office as a cover story for extracurricular activities. Sarah, the marketing director, gave me the rundown on our biggest accounts. Mike from operations explained the logistics challenges we were facing. Jennifer from finance walked me through the budget projections that made my old salary look like pocket change. These were professionals who treated their careers like careers, not like elaborate schemes to justify infidelity. "So, what brought you to New York?" Sarah asked during lunch. We were at some trendy place near the office where the sandwiches cost more than I used to spend on groceries. But the company was picking up the tab, so I was living large. "Better opportunity," I said, which was true without being the whole truth. Sometimes you need a change of scenery to remember who you are. I get that. I moved here from Chicago 5 years ago. Best decision I ever made. There's something about this city that forces you to level up, you know. She was right. In the weeks since I'd arrived, I'd already started changing, walking faster, thinking bigger, carrying myself like someone who belonged in rooms where important decisions got made. The version of Marcus who'd spent months heating up dinner alone while his wife screwed her boss felt like a character from someone else's life. Meanwhile, back in my old hometown, the fallout was apparently reaching nuclear levels. I've been getting updates from Noah, who seemed to be enjoying the drama more than anyone should. "Dude, Julia's life is imploding in real time," he told me during one of our check-in calls. She tried to go back to work Monday, but word about the screenshots had spread through the office like wildfire. Apparently, Adrian's wife found out, too. Someone sent her copies of everything. His wife, oh, yeah. Forgot to mention that. Adrian's married with 2 kids. His wife is some kind of lawyer, and from what I hear, She's not taking this development well. There are rumors about divorce papers and asset freezing and all kinds of legal nastiness. The irony was beautiful. Adrian, the smooth-talking boss who'd been using my marriage as entertainment, was about to discover what happens when your own spouse finds out you're a cheating piece of garbage. Julia, who'd thought she was trading up from her boring husband to some kind of corporate prince, had actually hitched her wagon to a married father who was about to lose everything in what sounded like a very expensive divorce. What about Julia? She's been staying with her mom, but Linda's apparently not thriving with the arrangement. Brooke told my cousin that there have been some epic screaming matches about responsibility and consequences and how Julia brought shame on the family. Very old school Catholic guilt trip stuff. I should have felt bad for her. For years of marriage should have bought her some sympathy from me, even after everything. But all I felt was a distant sort of relief, like watching a car accident in your rear-view mirror and realizing you'd gotten out of the way just in time. The city was working its magic on me. I was sleeping better, eating better, exercising regularly for the first time in years. I joined a gym near the office, started exploring different neighborhoods on weekends, even began thinking about what kind of person I wanted to be now that I wasn't defined by someone else's betrayal. 3 weeks in, Harold flew up from the home office to check on my progress. "You look different," he said as we sat in his hotel bar, sharing what he called a celebration drink for my successful transition. "Different, how?" "Lighter, like you're not carrying around someone else's problems anymore." "That's probably because I'm not good. I was worried about you for a while there. Watching someone with your potential sabotage himself over a relationship that wasn't working was painful." "It wasn't that it wasn't working." I corrected him. "It was that only one of us was actually in the relationship. Hard to make something work when you're the only one trying." Harold raised his glass to new beginnings and better choices. "I'll drink to that." For the first time in months, I meant it. 2 months into my New York renaissance, I was having the kind of Tuesday that made me question why I'd ever lived anywhere else. Closed a major deal with a client in Topeka, grabbed lunch at a place where celebrities casually ate salads next to normal humans, and was walking back to the office feeling like I'd finally figured out this whole successful adult thing when I spotted her. Julia, standing outside my office building like some kind of ghost from my past. Except ghosts usually have the decency to stay dead instead of showing up uninvited in your new life. She looked rough. That was the kindest way to put it. The polished magazine cover version of Julia, who used to spend 2 hours getting ready for her work meetings, had been replaced by someone who looked like she'd been sleeping in her car and using gas station bathrooms for priming. Her hair was unwashed. Her clothes were wrinkled. And she had that desperate energy that people get when their carefully constructed world collapses and they're scrambling to find someone to blame. "Marcus, we need to talk." "No." "Hello." "No." "How are you?" "No." Acknowledgement that showing up at someone's workplace unannounced after they've moved across the country to get away from you might be considered slightly psychotic behavior. Just straight to the demands. Because apparently 4 years of marriage hadn't taught her anything about basic human courtesy. "Julia, what the hell are you doing here?" "I flew up this morning. We need to talk about us, about our marriage, about what we're throwing away." "Us, our marriage, what we're throwing away." The audacity was almost impressive. She was talking like this was some mutual decision we'd made together instead of the natural consequence of her spending 3 months screwing her boss while turning my personal life into office entertainment. "There is no us, Julia. There is no our marriage. You made sure of that when you decided Adrienne was more interesting than your husband." She looked around nervously, probably realizing that having this conversation on a busy Manhattan sidewalk wasn't her smartest move. "Can we go somewhere private? There are things I need to explain, things you don't understand about what really happened." Against every instinct screaming at me to walk away, I agreed to coffee. Not because I wanted to hear her explanations. I'd seen enough screenshots to know exactly what had happened, but because some masochistic part of me was curious to see how she planned to spin this disaster into something that wasn't entirely her fault. We went to a Starbucks 2 blocks away. The kind of anonymous corporate space where you could have life-altering conversations surrounded by people who didn't give a about your drama. Julia ordered some complicated drink with extra shots and alternative milk because apparently even in the middle of her personal apocalypse, she couldn't just get a regular coffee like a normal human being. "Marcus, I made a mistake. A huge mistake. But it wasn't what you think it was really because what I think is that you spent 3 months having an affair with your married boss while making me look like an idiot to everyone we know. Which part of that is incorrect?" She flinched like I'd slapped her, which was rich considering she'd spent weeks emotionally bludgeoning me with lies and manipulation. "Adrian and it was complicated. He was my mentor and he made me feel important, like my ideas mattered. You were always so busy with your own stuff and I felt invisible in our marriage." "My own stuff?" You mean like the job I was considering leaving for a massive promotion that you convinced me to turn down twice? That stuff? I didn't know about New York until you didn't know because you never asked. You were too busy planning your next late-night strategy session to give a damn about my career or my life or anything that didn't revolve around you and Adrian's twisted little office romance. She started crying then, the kind of calculated tears that she'd always used when she wanted to end an argument without actually addressing the issues. Manipulation disguised as vulnerability, emotional blackmail wrapped up in victim cosplay. I thought you'd always forgive me, she whispered. I thought you were too passive to ever actually leave. I took you for granted, and I know that was wrong, but people make mistakes, Marcus. For years of marriage has to count for something. There it was. The truth. She'd been dancing around for 2 months. She'd been counting on my passivity, banking on the fact that I'd be too weak or too loyal or too stupid to call her on her. I'd been her safety net while she explored other options. The reliable backup plan she could return to when her exciting affair inevitably imploded. You're right, Julia. People do make mistakes. But what you did wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. You chose Adrian over me every single night for 3 months. You chose to lie to me, to humiliate me, to treat our marriage like an inconvenience you had to work around. But I choose you now. I'm here, aren't I? I'm trying to fix this. You're here because Adrian dumped you when his wife found out and his life started falling apart. You're here because your backup plan moved to New York and you're scrambling to find someone to pay your bills and stroke your ego. This isn't about choosing me. This is about damage control. She was full-on sobbing now, attracting stares from other customers who were probably wondering if they should call security or just enjoy the free entertainment. But I felt nothing. No sympathy, no urge to comfort her. No residual love trying to convince me to give her another chance. What if I'm pregnant? She blurted out, playing what she clearly thought was her trump card. I laughed, actually laughed out loud in the middle of Starbucks while my soon-to-be ex-wife claimed to be carrying my child. The absurdity was too much to handle with any kind of dignity. Julia, we haven't had sex in 2 months. And before that, it was maybe once every few weeks when you weren't too tired from your work commitments. If you're pregnant, congratulations. It's either the second coming of Christ or Adrian's problem. Her face crumpled. And I realized she just admitted to lying about something that could have changed my entire life. Even in her desperation, she couldn't resist trying to manipulate me with fake emergencies and manufactured crisis. I needed you to care. I needed you to fight for me. I did care, Julia. For 4 years, I cared more about your happiness than my own success. More about your comfort than my own career. More about saving our marriage than saving my dignity. I cared right up until the moment I realized you'd never cared about me at all. I stood up, leaving her crying into her overpriced latte like the star of her own tragic drama. Enjoy New York, Julia. Try not to sleep with any married guys while you're here. Walking away from that coffee shop felt like closing the final chapter of the worst book I'd ever read. I had a life to get back to, a real life with actual opportunities and genuine relationships with people who didn't think loyalty was a character flaw. Julia could keep the drama. I was done being part of the cast. Life has a twisted sense of humor, and nowhere was that more apparent than in the cosmic comedy that unfolded over the next few months. While I was building my new life in Manhattan, better apartment, better job, better everything, Adrian's world was crashing down like a house of cards in a hurricane. And honestly, I had front row seats to the most satisfying show I'd ever witnessed. The first sign that karma was sharpening her claws came about 3 weeks after Julia's pathetic coffee shop ambush. I was at a networking event in Midtown, the kind of corporate mixer where people in expensive suits drink overpriced wine and pretend to care about each other's quarterly projections. I was actually enjoying myself. Shocking, I know. When I heard a familiar voice behind me, Marcus Coleman, Jesus, what are the odds? I turned around to find myself face-to-face with Tony Ricci, a guy I'd known back in college, who'd somehow become a hotshot marketing executive. We'd kept in loose touch over the years, the kind of LinkedIn connection that exists purely for professional networking and the occasional happy birthday message. Tony, what brings you to the big city? Just transferred here from Chicago. Got offered a position I couldn't refuse. He grinned and took a sip of his wine. Actually, funny story. I'm working for the same company your ex-wife does. Well, it's a small world, right? My blood went cold. Oh, man. You don't know. Julia got canned about 2 weeks ago. Whole thing was a disaster. Apparently, she was having an affair with some executive, and when his wife found out, she went nuclear, hired a private investigator, got evidence of company resources being used for personal activities, hotel rooms charged to corporate accounts, that kind of thing. The wine in my glass suddenly tasted like victory with hints of cosmic justice. The guy Adrian something got transferred here to New York, but his reputation followed him like a bad smell. Word travels fast in this industry and apparently everyone knows he's the boss who sleeps with his employees. Not exactly the kind of guy you want leading your team, you know. I nearly choked on my drink. Adrian's here in New York. Yeah. Started about a month ago. Poor bastard thought a change of scenery would help, but turns out you can't outrun your own stupidity. His wife cleaned him out in the divorce, took the house, the kids, half his 401k, and enough alimony to fund a small country. Guy went from corner office to studio apartment real quick. The universe was apparently running a special on poetic justice, and Adrian was getting the full package deal. Over the next few weeks, I started hearing Adrian's name pop up in the most delightful contexts. New York's marketing scene was smaller then. People realized Adrian's reputation had preceded him like a warning label on toxic waste. At industry mixers, people would literally turn away when he approached. At business lunches, conversations would die when he walked by. The man had become a professional pariah, and he'd earned every bit of it. The best part, he was working for a mid-tier agency now, nothing like the prestigious firm he'd left behind. His new position was basically a lateral move disguised as a demotion. And from what I heard through the grapevine, his new colleagues treated him like he had a contagious disease. Nobody wanted to be associated with the guy who destroyed his marriage and career for some employee's wife. Melissa, Adrian's ex-wife, had gone full scorched earth during their divorce proceedings. She'd not only taken him to the cleaners financially, but had also made sure everyone in their social circle knew exactly why their marriage had ended. Screenshots of his group chat messages had somehow found their way to school parent groups, country club committees, and professional associations. The man couldn't grab coffee without running into someone who knew he was a cheating douchebag. But the real cherry on top of this karma sundae came at a charity auction in Soho about 4 months after my coffee encounter with Julia. I was there representing my company, bidding on some art for the office, and generally enjoying the kind of high-end networking event that came with my new position. The crowd was the usual mix of corporate executives, tech entrepreneurs, and people who had more money than sense. I was examining a sculpture that probably cost more than my old annual salary when I felt someone approach from behind. I turned around and there he was, Adrian Martinez, looking like someone had put him through a blender set to life lessons. Gone was the polished executive who'd once bragged about hotel receipts in group chats. This version of Adrian looked tired, desperate, and about 10 years older than his actual age. His suit was nice, but not expensive. His confidence was nowhere to be found, and he had that defeated posture that comes with being professionally and personally destroyed. "Marcus," he said, and I could hear the forced casualness in his voice. "I didn't expect to see you here, Adrian. How's New York treating you?" His smile was about as convincing as a $3 bill. "Can't complain. New city, new opportunities. You know how it is." "Oh, I know exactly how it is. Fresh starts are amazing when you actually deserve them." He flinched and I realized he knew that I knew everything. The screenshots, the group chats, the hotel receipts, the whole sordid mess that had turned his life into a cautionary tale about workplace affairs. "Look, Marcus, about what happened back home? What about it? I think there were some misunderstandings, some things that got blown out of proportion. Maybe we could grab a drink sometime, clear the air." The audacity was breathtaking. This guy had spent months mocking me in group chats, bragging about screwing my wife, and turning my marriage into office entertainment. And now he wanted to grab drinks and clear the air like we were old buddies who'd had some minor disagreement about sports teams. "You know what, Adrian? I think the air is pretty clear already. Crystal clear, actually. Come on, man. We're both professionals. No reason we can't bury the hatchet and move forward." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw exactly what he was. A middle-aged man who destroyed his own life for a few months of excitement and was now desperately trying to convince himself that his catastrophic choices were somehow everyone else's fault. "You're right," I said. "There's no reason we can't move forward. The difference is I already have. You buried yourself, Adrian. I don't need to bury anything." His face went pale and I could see the exact moment he realized that I wasn't going to help him rehabilitate his image or pretend his actions hadn't destroyed multiple lives. I walked away, leaving him standing there with his fake smile and his desperate networking attempts. Watching Adrian's fall hadn't been the goal. It had just been a pleasant side effect of choosing myself over a toxic situation. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well while your enemies destroy themselves. 6 months into my New York chapter, I was living the kind of life that people write motivational Instagram posts about. Corner office with a view of the Hudson Bank account that didn't give me anxiety attacks and a social calendar that didn't revolve around wondering where my spouse was spending the night. But the real victory wasn't the professional success or the financial security. It was waking up every morning without that knot of dread in my stomach that had been my constant companion during the final months of my marriage. The updates from my old life came through Noah, who'd apparently appointed himself as my personal war correspondent for the ongoing disaster that was Julia's existence. And let me tell you, the reports were more entertaining than anything Netflix had to offer. "Dude, you're not going to believe this latest development," Noah said during one of our weekly check-ins. "Julie is dating her personal trainer now." "Of course she is. Let me guess. He's got abs you could wash laundry on and the emotional intelligence of a golden retriever." "Bingo. Guy's name is Chad because of course it is. And he's exactly the kind of meathead who thinks protein powder is a food group. But here's the kicker. He's already cheating on her." The irony was so perfect it almost hurt. Julia, who destroyed her marriage by cheating with her boss, was now getting cheated on by a guy whose idea of intellectual conversation probably involved comparing pre-workout supplements. Karma wasn't just knocking on her door. It had kicked the door down and was redecorating the entire house. She caught him with some Instagram influencer who does those fitness videos in bikinis. Apparently, Julia walked into the gym unannounced and found them in a very non-professional training session. The meltdown was legendary. Screaming, throwing weights, threatening to sue the gym for emotional trauma. They banned her for life. I should have felt some sympathy for her. For years of marriage should have earned her at least a moment of pity when her new relationship imploded the same way ours had. But all I felt was a distant sense of cosmic balance being restored. The financial karma was even better. Turns out Julia's little tax evasion scheme, keeping her parents' address to claim benefits she wasn't entitled to, had finally caught up with her. The IRS doesn't have a sense of humor about fraud, even the small-scale variety, and they'd hit her with penalties and back taxes that wiped out what little savings she'd managed to accumulate. She had to move back in with Linda and Brooke, Noah continued. 3 grown women in a 2-bedroom apartment, and from what I hear, it's about as peaceful as a cage fight between raid badgers. Linda's been giving her the guilt trip of the century about bringing shame on the family. And Brooke's been playing amateur therapist, trying to get Julia to acknowledge her destructive patterns. The mental image of Julia, the woman who'd once complained about our apartment being too small, crammed into her childhood bedroom while her mother lectured her about responsibility and consequences, was almost too good to be true. But the real plot twist came a month later when Brooke reached out to me directly. "Marcus, I know you probably don't want to hear from any of us, but I thought you should know that Julie has been asking about you. She says she's in therapy now, working on herself, and she's sorry for everything that happened." "That's great for her, Brooke. I hope she finds whatever she's looking for. She was wondering if maybe once she gets her life together, you might consider." "No, you don't even know what I was going to ask." "Yes, I do. And the answer is no to all of it. Julia burned that bridge, salted the earth, and then nuked the entire landscape. There's no going back, no second chances, no working things out. I'm done." Brooke was quiet for a moment. She really is different now. The therapy seems to be helping, and she's starting to understand how badly she hurt you. Good for her. Personal growth is important. But it doesn't undo 4 years of taking me for granted, 3 months of cheating, and weeks of lying to my face while her boss made jokes about my marriage. I'm glad she's getting help, but her healing journey doesn't include me. That conversation was liberating in a way I hadn't expected. For months, I've been waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Julia to find some new way to disrupt my peace or drag me back into her drama. But hearing myself say those words out loud, hearing how final and certain they sounded made me realize I was truly done. Not angry done or hurt done, but actually completely peacefully done. My 6-month performance review came with another raise and the offer to make my New York position permanent. Harold flew up from the home office to deliver the news personally, and we celebrated at a steakhouse that probably cost more per meal than I used to spend on groceries in a week. "You know, Marcus, I've been doing this for 30 years, and I've never seen someone bounce back from a personal crisis the way you have. Most people would still be wallowing in self-pity or trying to win their ex back. You just moved on. Sometimes the best thing you can do is cut your losses and bet on yourself instead of waiting for other people to figure out your worth. Well, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. The company's taking notice, and there are bigger opportunities coming down the pipeline." But the biggest opportunity hadn't come from work. It had come from the most unexpected place of all. 3 weeks earlier, I'd met Leah at a bookstore in Brooklyn. She was an editor at a small publishing house, had a laugh that made me forget my own name, and possessed the revolutionary quality of being exactly who she claimed to be. Our first date was coffee that turned into dinner that turned into a 6-hour conversation about everything and nothing. Our second date was a comedy show in the village where she laughed at my terrible jokes and made better ones of her own. By the third date, I realized I'd forgotten what it felt like to be with someone who actually wanted to be there. Leah didn't work late with mysterious bosses. She didn't have secret group chats where she mocked my existence. She didn't treat our relationship like an inconvenience to be managed around her real priorities. She was just present, honest, real. "You know what I like about you?" she said one evening as we walked through Central Park, the same park I could see from my apartment windows. "My devastating good looks and humble personality. Your peace. You've got this calm confidence like you know who you are and you're comfortable with it. It's attractive as hell." Peace. That wasn't a word anyone would have used to describe me a year ago. A year ago, I was the guy who heated up dinner alone while his wife screwed her boss. The guy who turned down life-changing opportunities to accommodate someone else's lies. The guy who was so afraid of being alone that he stayed in a relationship that was slowly killing him from the inside. Standing there in Central Park with Leah, looking up at the skyline of a city that had given me back my life, I realized that Julia had been right about one thing. If I couldn't trust her working late with her boss, we shouldn't have been together. She was absolutely right, and choosing myself had been the best decision I'd ever made.
That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the stories. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.